I declare the meeting open and welcome you to this month's monthly meeting of Council. The recording of this Council meeting will be available to the public on the Council's website for the minimum period of 6 months. In accordance with Council policy, I will now ask Council staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, Mayor.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malakadee people of the Yuin River, and the Lilliquanini people of the Far South. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We recognise that we have much to learn from Aboriginal people today who represent the world's oldest continued living culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Attendance. Tonight we have Deputy Mayor Thorpe, we have Councillor Gibson, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Camber-Smith, Councillor Temby and Councillor Burgess. And I'll ask the General Manager to introduce his staff, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got the Director of Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, Matthew Grimsey, our Manager of Finance and Information Services, Tracy Hankin, Acting Director, Community Wellbeing Services, Lyle Ground, our Media and Communications Coordinator, Kelly Davis, and Executive Assistant, Sandy Rustell.
Thank you. We have no apologies, we have no leave of absence, and we have no absent. Councillors, do you wish to declare any interests? Yes, you have your... If you'd like to, we'll start with Councillor Gibson. You'd like to read out what the agenda number and the conflict. Thank you.
Agenda number 10.003/23, report under section...
Oh, your mic. Oh, yep. Yeah. Oh, yep.
Start again.
Yep.
Agenda item 10.003/23, report under section 35F of LUPA. Just that I put in two representations actually, and so I'm just declaring that.
Thank you very much. We'll go to, Councillor. Yep, you're right. You got your mic on.
Okay, same sort of deal. David O'Neill, I've put a submission into the planning scheme, so it's agenda number 15.003 and 23 and 10.003/23.
Thank you.
Hi, Jenny Camber-Smith. I put in a representation on planning application DA 41/2022, which is agenda number 10.001/23, and I also put in some submissions to the section 35F.
Thank you. Okay, round the table.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have an agenda item number 10.003. I put in a submission to the a representation to the section 35F.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Mark Jessup, in relation to item 10.003/23, the LPS 35F, I made representations, so that's my first definite conflict of interest. Can I ask the council about a second one potentially?
You may.
The organisation I work for is a disability service, and we lease houses from a range of organisations, Housing Tas, etc., and one of the organisations that our residents lease properties from is Centacare Evolve, who are one of the developers, I suppose, on 10.002/23.
Yep.
I don't think I have a conflict of interest in that I have no pecuniary interest and I have no applications in this development or anything like that, but I just think I probably should lodge it as an interest.
Okay, so do I now ask the councillors whether they
Through you, Mayor, best to have that discussion just before you go into the agenda item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any others? No? That's a lot, thank you. Okay. Confirmation of minutes, 4.001/23. Do I have a councillor to move the minutes, to move that the minutes are confirmed for the ordinary meeting of council of Thursday, 15th of December 2022? Councillor Gibson, seconded Councillor Temby. Does any councillor wish to report any changes? No? Well, I put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion has been carried. 5, legislative items. Are there any legislative items, General Manager?
Yes, there is, Mayor. I table a letter from the Director of Local Government on expected standards of councillor behaviour and the Code of Conduct dated 19th of January 2023.
Thank you. 6, urgent matters. General Manager, are there any urgent matters tonight?
Yes, Mayor. Let me just find my... I bring forward the following matter, which is tender TN 172, which is the Dover medical expansion. So in accordance with Regulation 8.6 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulations 2015, I report that the matter was not included on the agenda for the meeting as the tender closed on the 23rd of January and was opened on the 24th of January in the expectation of completing a tender evaluation and report for the February ordinary meeting. The matter is urgent as no tenders were received. The project is a priority and authorisation is required to commence an alternative procurement process without further delay. Advice has been provided under Section 65 of the Act in a report to be discussed in closed council.
So, do I have a councillor to move the inclusion of the urgent matter? Councillor Gibson and Councillor Campbell-Smith. Thank you. 6.0, oh, that's it, isn't it? Oh, yes, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. 7, announcements. Do any councillors have any announcements tonight? Yes, Councillor Temby.
I had the pleasure of going out with Lockie to have a look at the roadworks on Cloverside Road. Very basic maintenance, just standard maintenance job done. But I can tell you that it's looking the best I've ever seen it. I've been walking up that road for 30 years, and I think what's happening is, you know, the crew are doing really well. They're empowered to actually do the extra little bits here and there as they're on the job, and I think it's great that the director is actually going out and inspecting the work and providing the feedback as to what's happening. And so I just wanted to congratulate the team.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, Councillor Burgess.
If I can just mention that I attended a little ceremony from the Keep Australia Beautiful, Tasmania. Mr Jeffrey Marsh, who's the president, came down to Geeston and to issue some certificates. Geeston did quite well this year in the competition, and I ended up representing the Huon Valley Council by accepting one on behalf of them for Heritage Park. They got another 4 certificates of excellence. One went to the Geeston Town Hall Controlling Authority, Geeston Progress Association, Geeston Cares and the Geeston Community Workshop. And I feel that it was a great representation of the town. Even though there are many more volunteer groups within the town, it was actually a great recognition of the effort that they put in. It was really good to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. 8, public participation. So, public question time. There was 8.1.1, the and the same applies as every other council meeting. Answers to previous questions taken on notice can be found on our website and will be included in the minutes. We had Caleb Elcox from the AGM, and that's the same. They will be on our website and included in the minutes. So now we've got 8.1.2, questions on notice. We had none. 8.1.3, questions without notice. We had two questions from Mr. Jeffrey Swan, and as an exception tonight, the General Manager will read out a response to one of the questions, and then they'll be on our website included in the minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just relates to question 2, which is obviously on the website, but I just wanted to reflect on that. As noted under Section 31 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, questions from the public to the General Manager, and therefore the response is from the General Manager. As has been confirmed in the response to the question in the 15 December 22 meeting papers, which was uploaded to our website before the meeting and available via the meeting minutes, the question does not identify a specific individual and was proposed to be answered on that basis. As you, Mr. Swan, raised concern that you're in some way identifiable in the question, we removed the question from the agenda in this instance. We have apologised for any concern that this question has brought to you, which is available through all of the same mediums that the question response was potentially accessible for those that may have seen it. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, from the gallery to those community members joining us in the gallery, if you'd like to ask a question, if you have a question, as the chair, I'll ask you to come forward to the microphone and identify yourself by name and area where you live. We'll normally allocate about 15 minutes, and all questions must be directed through the chair. So is there anyone that would like to come forward and ask a question? Yes, Councillor. Oh, Councillor, sorry. Dr. Smith. Well, you was a councillor.
Thank you.
I wasn't incorrect, but yeah. Yes.
Liz Smith, Signet. Through you, Mayor, to the General Manager. At the hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Public Works last October, there was little reference to Council's Huonville-Ranelagh Master Plan from April 2019 and its Transport Management Plan, which prioritised a holistic transport management study because many actions rely upon the outcome of that plan. However, on January the 11th, the Council announced in the Huon Valley News, under Huon Valley Works, that construction of the Huon Link Road would start in April or May this year, and that tenders will close on February the 1st. So my questions are, has the holistic transport management plan for Ranelagh-Huonville been undertaken, and at which council meeting did the Huon Valley Council formally provide support for the Huon Link Road project? I could go on to the second one. Yeah. What is the role of the council in the project, which was costed on council's website last year at $29.2 million? And is the council making a financial contribution? If so, what is that contribution?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that through to the General Manager.
I think Dr. Smith will have to take that on notice. I don't have that information at hand. So.
Thank you.
So it's taken on notice?
Yes, taken on notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have someone else to ask a question? Yes, and then, no, you're all right. No, you're fine. And then Amy can be after that. Thank you.
Michael Russell, Huonville. I tried to make a brief preamble because
yes,
there's usually a cast of thousands. I haven't been for a few years, but and then I got stuck watching the hurricanes this afternoon, which was incredibly exciting. My questions, and firstly I should say I have no issue with any landowners trying to maximise the value of their land. My questions relate to development applications in general. Am I allowed to specify one?
If it's not in, we can't talk about what's in the council. Yep, if you tell us the question, we'll be able to respond to you.
Currently, there are active DAs in Huonville for hundreds of new housing structures. What we know about the importance... With what we know about the importance of urban design and community living, much of which is written about and promoted by this council, so my questions are, what is council and councillors doing to ensure that the infrastructure and services of Huonville not will be compromised by all these developments? 2, what is council and councillors doing about a pushback to state government re-changing planning regulations so that approval for a structure is more than just ticking boxes? Finally, can councillors publicly demonstrate whether they support this huge amount of new housing, or do they see that even though it is admirable to have affordable housing, are we not just saying to people, look, here is some affordable housing, but it'll just be a little box in a confined space with no recreation, no green space and no access to a garden?
Okay, thank you very much. Can I pass that through to the General Manager to, yep. And take it on.
Not based on the information we received, so
Yep.
we would take that on notice.
Yeah. We'll have to take that on notice, Michael, if that's okay. Thank you. Amy?
Amy Robertson, Port Huon. At TPC hearings on the Huon Valley LPS that are approaching, who will be representing council? And what sort of approach or stance would council be taking through that personal team when engaging with individual representors?
Okay, thank you. Can I go through to the Director?
So without specifically providing for the officer, they'll be represented through our strategy and performance reporting. So we have a strategic land use planning officer who will have project management of the process. In relation to the position on individual representors, it'll be based on whatever the outcomes are of the Section 35F report tonight.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Okay, thank you. 8.2, deputations, addresses to council. Neil? 9, petitions. Neil? 10, I now advise that the council is acting as a planning authority as at
6:18 p.m.
Thank you. In accordance with the provision of Part 2, Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulations 2015, the Council will now act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect of those matters appearing under Item 10 of this agenda, inclusive of any other supplementary items. Planning application DA 41/2022, multiple dwellings, 18 new units at 15 Sales Street, Huonville, CT 106110/1. Agenda item number 10.001/23. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. And do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Gibson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, it's interesting after Michael Russell's comments. I mean, I think that some of these multiple development planning things are rather dense, and because of the vehicle requirements tend to be rather dominated by driveway and concrete, so there's not a lot we can do. As far as I can see, this meets the code, so I can't see what we can do about that. But I do feel like the landscaping has the potential to soften the dominance of the concrete driveway. So I would like to amend the motion, if possible, to have the plan, the landscape plan, come back to council for us to have a look at that time, if that's possible.
I'll have to go through to the director for that response to that.
Through you, Mayor, at the moment the mover has moved so we have a motion on the books which is moved and seconded, which is the recommendation. So if you wish to restate your motion with that amendment to see if you actually get a seconder for that.
Ah, yes. Well, it's the same motion, just the landscape plan is mentioned as coming back to council, to staff, but I mean, I think that the landscape plan does form very much part of it, so of the approval. So it's an amended motion saying that number three.
A detailed landscape plan.
Comes back to it, and it says to the Director of Infrastructure, Climate and Environmental Services, I would like to say that that comes back to council. If the second...
No, I think we've got it wrong there. Number 3 is a detailed landscape plan must be prepared by a qualified landscape architect.
And be approved,
Oh,
and
yeah.
submitted for approval by, and change that from Director, Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development to council.
Come to
prior
council.
to the commencement of works.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? What would you like to clarify, Councillor Thorpe?
Is it just the change that the report would come back to council for another vote rather than the council officer?
It's just
the
just the landscape plan.
Yeah.
Just the landscape plan?
Yeah.
Because I think that, as I said, I think it can make a huge difference.
Okay.
I'd like to see it.
Yep.
That's all.
Okay.
I'm happy to second that.
You're happy to second that? Yep.
Clarification, Mayor.
Wait a minute. Just okay. So I've got I'll go now back to. So I've got. Yep. Back to. Would you like to speak to your?
I think I've pretty much said everything. I mean, one of the elements here is that there is a big tree that's softening that area quite a lot at the moment, that the development has in its plan to remove, and I believe that the planning scheme doesn't have any, we don't have any way of pushing back on that, but we do have the ability to look at the landscape plan and make sure that there's some greenery and, you know, with regard to climate change, which is, you know, coming on every year, these spaces which are full of concrete get very hot, and so if we could have just make sure that the landscape plan addresses those issues, I think it would be a good thing.
Okay. All right. So, is there a councillor to speak against the motion?
A clarification, maybe, Mayor. What authority would we have to do anything with that landscape? That's where my head's going. Is we can see the landscape plan, but can we direct that more trees be planted, or what's our limit of authority? I would think
Okay.
we'd have absolutely none.
I will ask that question if that's.
Through you, Mayor, you have the same level of authority that I would, acting as Director, Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, improving the landscape plan. So what we would be doing is providing you with a landscape plan and advice as to how it meets the requirements of the scheme. You would be considering it as council, not as a planning authority.
So what, I suppose the question is, what authorities then do you have to direct a landscape plan?
Through the provisions of the condition of the planning permit.
So you can say there needs to be 10 trees every metre or 1 tree every metre, or is that?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
And really, that's just clarification. I'm seeking.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yep, you may.
I know that I've been down this track before with my thought process with other things, but I'm always confused as to why decks are allowed to almost be sitting on a boundary fence. I'm not sure whether that's... I know that it is a part of the legislation that makes it legal and, you know, able to be done through building regulations and whatnot. But are we getting to the point where we probably need to start looking at that a bit more closely? There's a lot of issues with the neighbours next door that were already there that have to now be looking directly into someone's kitchen, lounge room, bedroom, bathroom. Then there's the noise issue. Then there's potential devaluing. Are we really looking after our community if we're allowing these fairly dense little clusters of units? In saying that, I'm also very aware of the homelessness issue and the need for houses, but I do have to wonder if lots of concrete, no open spaces, decks on people's back fences is probably really the progressive way forward. So I don't know if there's something as a council we can regulate how many per area, or whether we can talk to somebody, because I'm not really all over it, but I thought it was just a point that I could make, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'm sure we can have that discussion. Yeah.
Through you, Mayor, we're bound by the planning scheme provisions that are there before us. Certainly something that you'll be looking at through the when the LPS comes into play is the opportunity for amendments to the LPS. So there is a rather large list of items that council can be considering in the strategic process. If council consider that that was significant, we'd need to do the strategic work to support future amendments to the scheme.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wondered if this extra stage would add a length of time to the process for the developer. So that's imposing a cost time-wise for the developer, but also in the response here where one of the submissions was the provision of green space is not adequate, the council's response is that a landscaping plan has been submitted, which includes a schedule of the species that will be planted as part of the development, and it's set out in attachment B. So we already have that, don't we? Is that right? That's on page 12.
Yeah. We'll just need to, the computer here is not playing nicely. From what I can read here, it's got to come back anyway. Yeah, so do we take that? Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a large document which is taking some time to open. However, at the end of the day, the delay that will be provided, or the delay on the developer progressing, will effectively be that instead of a fairly straightforward process with officer recommendation to myself as director, we'll need to do a full council report for that. So that would be a delay to get it to the next available council meeting.
And we'll to get the report to the next, that's if, to the next council meeting? Yep. And come through the chair.
Through you,
Yep.
Madam Chair, I'm just, the director said that it would take extra time to prepare those reports, and I'm wondering, is there an actual extra cost to the council for doing the report differently? And if you could describe that for me.
If I could go through, back to you, Matthew.
Through you, Mayor, I can't tell you the exact time as to how long it would take to do a report, simply because we haven't put a landscape plan through council before, so it will be a novel report. Reports writing can range between anywhere from an hour to 10 hours. I would have thought it would be in the lower range.
No.
There's a mistake in the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Fencing park, clean materials and surface. What one? Yeah.
Cross-reference the previous.
Ah.
Where is it?
18. Where?
I think that's his sales street maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yep, I gotcha. An outdoor clothes drying facility. Yeah, okay. Yep. Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
I've just looked through that document and there isn't a planning, landscape plan there that I can see.
Okay, all right. So, do I now go, just move on?
Your discussion on the motion.
Yep. Okay, so there's no other questions? No? Do you want to close, Councillor Gibson?
Just seeing that Bill says L01 landscape plan. Just quickly check that.
Have you got your mic on? Thank you.
I can see that it's in the title block that there's a landscape plan, but I couldn't see it on my way through. It's the last sheet of the drawings.
No.
Well,
We'll
will correct it.
formally reflect that as an amendment in the.
Yeah. Okay. It's not there, you can't? No. Yeah,
3 pages to go through.
yeah.
That's all civil design. It's the page before that. Civil works.
Has anyone else found it? No?
What's this? Pinnacle. Ah, there is one here. What's it say? Yep, there is a landscape plan.
Yep.
So why does it say here that we then just provide one? Or is that?
Through you, Mayor, it is a standard condition, so the landscape plan may be altered subject to meeting all the requirements of the planning permit.
Yeah. So there would be probably a standard one, you're saying, and then that with the conditions that you've got, they have to come back with a,
They will amend what they've
yeah, they must amend the one they have to have the conditions there that are under the A to E. I'm thinking. So, yeah.
So maybe it's because this hasn't been done by a landscape architect? So are we asking for one to come back or
Yes,
not?
we are. Well, they're coming back with the outline. They have to come back with the extra things that we've stated there. Pedestrian lighting plan.
Yep,
Yeah.
extra details,
Yeah,
fences,
that's right.
paths.
Yes. All right.
I don't know, I don't have anything further to add.
Okay. So as there was no councillor to speak against the motion, then I'll put the motion. For all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, with excluding councillor Camber-Smith, and the motion is carried. If you'd like to, yeah, ask councillor. Yep.
What I just put together in the conflict of interest, so which I'm about to need to go through because I need to sort it out from Mark's conflict.
So do we do that at,
We do that now.
to do that now? All right, okay. Thank you, councillor Camber-Smith. So is there an agenda item for that? I'll start off with this here and then we go to that. Yep. Okay. So planning application DA 159/2022, multiple dwellings, 31 new units at St Mark's Church, 2224 George Street, Cygnet, CT 247133/2, agenda number 10.002/23. And before we start, we would now discuss the conflict of interest. Is that correct?
So through you, Mayor, the process is set out in the management of conflict of interest policy. In circumstances where an interest has been declared, it's a matter for council if they wish to consider any risk management or appropriate actions. In this instance, the councillor has advised that he does not consider it sufficient to recuse himself effectively from the council meeting. As a result, the process is that the remaining councillors consider the risk process which is associated to ensure the decision is not challengeable.
Right. So if you'd like to state again for me what you perceived as being could be conflict of interest.
So the organisation I am CEO of has about 75 residential properties on lease from various organisations, largely non-private ones, so state government and social housing organisations. One of the organisations that I know that we do lease some properties from on behalf of tenants with a disability is Centacare Evolve. There's no financial benefit to me, let me assure you. They charge a full rate. And I have no management relationship with them or anything like that, but I just thought for matters of probity, given that I am involved in the social housing industry as a user of that or on behalf of clients, I thought I would let my colleagues and the council know, and if you felt that in some way influenced my vote, I'm happy to throw myself upon your mercy.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll open it up to any... Yes, sorry?
Councillor Jess would excuse himself from the meeting for this discussion.
Oh, okay. I'll ask you to leave, please. So we can... Thank you. So I can open it up now. Okay. So I'd like to open that up for discussion. If anyone has... Yep.
Can I explain the process?
Yes, okay. You explain the process.
Through you, Mayor, just the opportunity to explain the process to councillors, because this is the first time council is undertaking the process since adopted the policy. So the policy provides that whenever a decision maker declares a conflict of interest, the remaining non-conflicted decision makers, so councillors, will assess the conflict of interest. The purpose of this part is to understand what type of interest is involved, whether it's a pecuniary duties, relationship or likewise. What is the public duty the decision maker is being asked to perform, how the interest conflicts or might conflict with that public duty, and whether the conflict is actual, potential or perceived conflict. The council would then identify some key risks which are associated with it, and really the decision from council from risk management perspective is whether Councillor Jessup is asked to recuse himself or remains in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Dixon.
I guess as we're operating as a planning authority, the level of influence is not very great, and it sounds to me like his connection with Centre Caravolve is not very strong, so I'm comfortable with Councillor Jessup remaining in the decision-making process.
Thank you, Mayor. I've no objection at all to Mark staying in, as we are, as Paul says, acting as a planning authority. However, I was slightly puzzled as to why I was unable to be part of the previous meeting, given discussion, given it was just a submission. I had no pecuniary interest at all in that particular.
I'll have that explained to you, to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, having made a representation as a council, well, acting as a council as a planning authority, you have a choice of acting as a council in a planning authority, or have a choice of participating as a member of the public through participation in representations, enlivening planning appeal rights and so forth. The Council's Code of Conduct is clear, and I cannot read it word for word off the top of my head, but councillors must come to a council meeting with an unprejudiced mind, particularly with respect to planning matters, having made a representation that has put forward for consideration of the council. That certainly would trigger the potential for a breach of Code of Conduct, or certainly prima facie breach of Code of Conduct. The other part is that there is case law where a councillor who has made a representation has participated in the decision made by the council, and the decision was declared invalid by the Supreme Court. So there's a substantial risk to the validity of the decision as a result of participating.
Yes, Councillor.
I just wondered how that is different from the submissions made to the Section 35F report.
Through you.
Yes, through you, Mayor. And it's been a matter for you as councillors. The advice that was provided at the time, which I understand was through the Director of Local Government, was that you were acting in accordance with benefits and detriments that the whole municipal area had, and so that it wouldn't trigger a pecuniary interest under the Part 5 of Local Government Act.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Or yes, Councillor Thorpe?
I'd just like to say that I think with Councillor Jessup's scenario, I don't think there is any dependent relationship in terms of conflict of interest. If this permit was to be granted or not granted, I don't think it would affect any of his working relationships, so I'm totally okay with him being involved.
All right. So, do we then go to the vote? No?
Through you.
Yep. Yep.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Just I'm not sure you've had the opportunity for everybody to respond.
Nobody else sort of. Yeah, them. Yep. Yep.
For the purpose of minuting, I think we can resolve that, as in without a formal resolution.
Okay.
You can, councils have discussed the matter and resolved that there are no issues with Councillor Jessup participating.
All right. Is everybody happy with that? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. key to the cupboard. Making a cup of tea. So I go back to the agenda item 10.002/23. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor O'Neill. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Burgess. Councillor O'Neill, do you wish to speak to the motion? Yep.
Okay, yep, I realise this development's created a bit of discussion in our community, but I'd just like to point out that I'm personally aware of a lot of people in our town that so long-term renters, mainly usually female or older age, and probably a couple of years ago they're paying $250 a week for their rent, and now they're up to $400 and they just can't afford to live there anymore. They're going to lose their pets, and the caravan park is packed out and $70 a night. So I really think it's desperately needed for the vulnerable in our community, and the quicker the better. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a councillor speak against the motion? No, so are there any... Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Gibson?
It's not against the motion.
Is it a question?
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, yeah. So we had no one to speak against the motion, so are there any questions? Councillor Gibson?
The question is around the two big trees at the top of the hill in the same area as the landslip issues are a problem, and as an architect I can see a way of retaining those two trees and changing making a little park there and changing the road alignment to increase the number of houses back along Louisa Street. So I would like to, I think it's approvable as it is, but I would like to, because of the fact that it has drawn some community concern, I'd like to write to the developer and to the church and just request that they look at that area again. I think we have to approve it, but that they may be able to redesign that little top area and improve it, as my request. I did have another question, which I may as well do at the same time, which was with regard to traffic movements, and the sort of tailing off of the driveway into the as yet to be constructed Louisa Street, and it's very unusual to have have a driveway stop like that. I guess there's some intention for that to continue at some stage, but I'm not quite sure whether we have any information on that. So I have a question around that too.
Okay, if I can pass that through you, General Manager, to the Director.
Through you, Mayor, working backwards, we don't have any information as to what any future plans are. No. This is just a development application that is before us, and it does make some sense having a connection because if they ever do develop Louisa Street in the future. But at the moment, that's where the road ends and their access is via Golden Valley Road. In relation to a letter, then if that was sufficiently supported by councillors, we could send a letter off to them. At the end of the day, it's up to them. It's up to the developers.
Okay. Yes.
I'll move an amendment then to just add that that letter be written. Just adjust. Retaining the two avatars, which are identified as trees 18 and 19, as a small pocket park. It's right on the top of the hill looking out over Cygnet. It would really make the development a lot better in terms of public open space. You might lose one house off it, but those houses are pretty expensive because of the landslip issues, the big retaining walls. It's not an easy place to build. So you're sort of leaving the most difficult place to build as a park, which makes sense, and then increasing the number of houses along Louisa Street to compensate.
That's a big change then, that one, isn't it?
Just the end of the road.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
if that...
It may come to nothing, but I do know that the church are concerned to do the right thing by the community, and, you know, they may consider that it is worth
All right.
making an adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Through you, General Manager, to the Director, is that a whole new...
No, through you, Mayor, that can just be a paragraph C, so it's not connected to the planning permit conditions or anything, it's just a separate motion.
Yep, okay, all right. So do
I
I
don't know
have
if
to...
anybody will second it.
Yep, so I have to get a seconder and go through the process there. So would you like to... would you like Councillor Gibson to write what he wants that to be?
Just please read so that we can have that fully recorded before we have it
Yeah.
seconded.
Yes, so if you can say it again before we get it seconded.
Could
Yeah.
we write a letter to the developers requesting that they consider realigning the end of the driveway to create a pocket park at the site of the two large abatas numbered number 18 and 19 in the arboricultural assessment, and realign the end of the driveway turnaround to put the units along Louisa Street rather than in that area.
All right, thank you. Do I have a seconder to Councillor Gibson's amendment to add that as item C? Is that correct? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Campbell-Smith? So then I go to the vote on that one.
You go to discussion.
Don't go to discussion, okay. So, do I have a councillor to speak against the amendment?
Not a,
No, don't have to do that? No?
Just through you, Mayor, the opportunity for Councillor
Council-
Gibson to speak to the
Oh,
member.
yep, sorry, first. Yep, sorry.
I don't know how many of the councillors have been up to the top of the hill there, but it's a pretty impressive place. I don't know whether you've read the description of those trees. I read it and then I went on site and had a look at it. Sorry. I don't know whether the councillors have been up to the top of the hill, but it is quite impressive, the view out there. And those two trees that I hadn't really noticed until I read the arboricultural assessment, which was very insistent that they were it was important to retain them. So I went on site and had a look at them, and they are beautiful trees, and it would make a really beautiful little park there. I think there's a lot of houses on this site. I totally agree with Councillor O'Neill that affordable housing is very, very much needed in Cygnet as the rest of the Huon. So I support densification of that area and building these houses, but I think it's a balance, and if we can get a really nice little park as a part of that development, a lot of the houses don't have a lot of garden space, so a shared space with some big trees could be a really good thing.
Thank you. So now I'll go to the fact, is there anyone to speak against that motion? Yes, councillor.
through you, Mayor, not against, or I'm not sure what I'm speaking about. I have a comment. Now, I'm a bit geographically challenged, we all know this, but on this map, we're talking about this little dead end bit coming out onto Louisa Street. Yeah, but it doesn't come out onto Louisa Street, because Louisa Street's the other side. So that's not really correct.
Louisa Street is gazetted.
Is that an old easement thingy?
Louisa Street goes right through there
Because Louisa Street stops at,
it's not built, but it's there.
so,
Right through to the school.
so it'll have to go through the paddocks that belong to somebody else to get to this years down the track and blah,
No,
blah.
it's
Anyway, I
good.
just wanted to confirm.
It's gazetted all the way.
Yes, right, okay, so it's an old road. Because I'm thinking, that's nowhere near Louisa Street, and I'm just wondering why it was coming out. Okay, so that aside, I'm with Dave, like, I know that we need it, but I'm concerned about the traffic. I'm concerned about the fact that we don't have infrastructure to cope with what we've already got. I know it's not council issues, but council keep pushing these things through and saying, yes, 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 we can do it, but at some stage we have to liaise with somebody bigger. You know, it's in a parcel where there's schools, there's a bowls club, there's tennis clubs, there's bus routes, there's kids, it's coming down a hill. There's quite a lot of difficult factors other than the actual development itself going on, which I know that living is so much better, but it's a rock and a hard place. And there are a lot of houses crammed into that one reasonably tight corner. Again, I think we need to liaise more closely with our, you know, fellow politicians, parliamentarians, state, because pretty soon this is going to become the norm, and I'm not entirely sure whether it needs to become the norm in our Huon, but we do need to find a solution to homes and housing. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'll come to you next, Kat.
Through you, Mayor. So the director probably. So if we're to look at, after what Councillor Armstrong's just said, if we're to look at Signet and write a special area plan around that, are these the sorts of things that we could include? Some controls around how the multi-developments are, how much space is provided for public open space and gardens?
You mean for future?
In future, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So future private open space, because it takes into considerations the particular constraints and the character of that township.
Yeah. And when could we get around to doing this SAP? For Signet?
So the land use development strategy includes town structure planning as part of its process. So the SAPs will follow the land use development strategy.
So this year?
Whether or not they'd be starting this year, certainly it'll be later this year. Bear in mind there will be a gap between when the LPS comes into force and the opportunity for us to do amendments.
Okay. Yes. Councillor Keller.
Yeah, Councillor Gibson had very similar thoughts as I did, because I feel that, as per my email seeking clarification from the director, a lot of the representations against, or not against, but with respect to this application had a lot of merit, I felt, and the same might have been applied to the previous one that I wasn't privy to, so I apologise if there are things I'm raising here that have already been discussed on the previous one. But we've already talking about climate change as an issue, and yet we're constantly approving development applications that have large areas of concrete, impermeable surfaces, no sensible solar orientation. I mean, some of these dwellings are dreadful. I mean, they might have a 7-star rating, but they've got no, the residents will have no morning sun. No, some of them, or the southeastern aspects, for instance, have got no windows or tiny windows. The kitchens have no windows. Things like that, which seem utterly crazy that council can have no input on. And stormwater is a big issue, I think, for us. This one is not so bad in that it does apparently have 1,000-litre retention tanks and a certain amount of filtration coming off the site. We talk about designing for 100-year events, but those 100-year events are becoming a lot more frequent these days. So I think we should be thinking a lot more about stormwater retention as well, and some of these particular houses in this design are very dark. They're very dark roofs. That's the worst thing we could possibly be doing in a heating environment. The amount of concrete we're talking about here is going to create a massive urban heat islands, and I think where we can, we should circumvent the planning restrictions that we're stuck with by talking at a very early stage to the developers about, you know, if there's a big subdivision coming forward, let's say we need a special area plan because we, as a council, have a policy that we want to try and improve the well-being of our and climate resiliency of our people. I mean, we did a zone change just at the other meeting. It's not, you know, these things are possible. So let's you know, think about this at a much earlier stage of the development process, so that we can address these issues, so that we can put residents in. And I have no qualms at all about the densification, because housing is a massive issue, and we need small units that suit all sorts of different people. And there's a lot of single people that are alone and need you know, just a small one-bedroom place. I have no problem with semis, with chalets, even with terraces, providing you've got plenty of green open space that people can share and stuff. So it's really a comment rather than a, you know, and I know we have to approve it because we weren't on the front foot. We didn't approach the developer. We didn't talk to them about a special area plan, but maybe we could do that in the future.
Okay, thank you. Yes, councillor. Yes, councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. By way of preamble, I think we have a great opportunity in this council 4 years to actually really do look at a diverse densification program. So why aren't we building up? Why aren't we building terraces? Why aren't we building open spaces? And we do need a diversity of land, et cetera, So I can commend, you know, these two developments at one level, that at least they are trying to solve some housing issues. Maybe in retrospect, we'll look back at these in 20 years' time and say, I wish we did it in a different way. But anyway, that's another issue. But the question through you, Mayor, is because this is a religious order, are these rateable, these properties, or are they rate exempt?
Can I ask that through General Manager to the Director?
Through you, Mayor, that will need to be assessed whether they fit under the provisions of charitable purposes under the Local Government Act. So they may be rateable and they may not be rateable.
So I assume
they don't currently exist at the moment, so we don't have any ability to assess them.
I would hope that those sold privately would be rateable and those held for social housing might not be. But anyway, thank you.
As long as they're following the rules, I should imagine that, yep. Okay. Councillor Timmy? No. Any other questions or statements or? Yes, yes. Yep.
Support Councillor Gibson's amendment, but are we just asking St Mark's their goodwill to change it? It's up to them whether they accept it, and hopefully, being what they are, they will.
Yep.
For the good.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Burgess, did you?
Yeah, so Councillor Gibson, you were asking for...
Perhaps your mic on, Andrew, is it on? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Gibson, you were asking that we write to the developers to take out, what, 3 units? 18, 19, 20?
No, that was trees. 18, 19 were trees.
18 and 19 were trees, but I think the numbers on those units over there are something like that. I've scribbled over the top.
That's on the landslip area?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a 3 on that area.
Those 3 on the landslip area. And flip them over to the Louisa Street alignment.
Yep.
Put them on the other side of the driveway.
Okay.
Swing the driveway around and make a park where the trees are.
Okay. Is there a... I haven't seen it. I can't see it where I'm flicking through it. Public open space in this development, how much of that have we got?
Through you,
Through you, Mayor, it's not a subdivision, so there's no public open space that applies.
It's not a subdivision.
It's not a subdivision, it's a multiple dwelling.
Another
Public open
technicality.
space only applies to subdivisions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thorpe.
If the developer is to, off goodwill, take the recommendation from that letter, would that delay the process, and would they have to resubmit this with the new layout?
Through you, Mayor, the most likely course of action would be a minor amendment at the minimum.
Okay. Would you like, have you got any closing?
We can but try.
Okay. As there was no councillor speak against the amended motion. Amendment. Then I will, yes, to the motion, yep. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the amendment to the motion has been carried.
The amendment becomes the motion.
And the amendment comes the motion. Gee, crikeys. Okay. So do we need to do, yep. Is there no more further discussion on that? Okay. So then we put that amendment. Motion. Yep. All those, just go straight to the, yep, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Motion is carried. That's all councillors, the motion is carried. Wow. Report under section 35F of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 on representations received by the Planning Authority following exhibition of the draft Huon Valley Local Provisions Scheduled LPH-HUO-TPS agenda number 10.003/23. And I need to note that we have an amended recommendation that has been distributed to the councillors. You've got that? So I refer the councillors to the amended recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Armstrong. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this motion? To the amended? Yep.
To be perfectly honest, I need somebody to explain this to me in a brief manner because I'm so thoroughly confused because we've had so many amendments. And I think if we could just clarify that for the public and for us, again, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Just quickly, just so we're all on the same page. Thank you. Sorry to be a pain.
So through you, Mayor, earlier this week the Huon Valley Zoning Association wrote to the council identifying that there were a number of potential issues, errors or matters that required clarification. The opportunity was taken to review those matters that were raised with the council, and they did in fact identify some matters that did require clarification. What has been prepared is an Appendix 1 review to the Section 35F report, which addresses those matters for clarification.
Which is this? Yes, but the appendix here, that bit there. Okay. Yep. Is anyone speaking against this before we go on?
I think
No.
they'll need to ask questions before that.
Okay, all right, okay. Off you go, Councillor Gibson.
Just with regard to the appendix, I'm happy to correct mistakes and misinformation, but there's also some change of zoning here, and we had a lengthy discussion at the workshop trying to work out a set of principles by which these changes of zone would be made, and a process outlined, which I believe is outlined in the amended recommendation, or is it? Where are those principles?
Through you, General Manager, to the Director. Do you?
Yes, through you, Mayor. On, if I can get them to open up, I believe it's pages 10 and
Yes,
11 or 11 and 12 of the attachment to 10.003. So it forms part of the Section 35F report.
Oh, that's right. So it's not in the recommendation, it's in the report. Correct. That's right. And I think that, you know, we did a lot of work you did a lot of work to put together some good principles there. So I would like to, apart from the corrections of, you know, minor numbers and addresses, I would like to leave changing of zoning to that process so that everybody's on the same page and everybody's being treated equally. Because there's a lot of people who put in representations on various things, and I just think that the process, you have a process in order that it's followed, and that makes it fair. So.
So you move your.
So I'm objecting to, I guess, I'm objecting to changes of zoning in amongst this.
Okay.
Rather than having the process.
Yep, thank you. I think the Director would like to explain.
Through you, Mayor, unfortunately I'm having technical difficulties tonight, and every time I want to open my document it doesn't come up. There were two representations which were identified as the potential for errors in the representations themselves. The first one, which I believe was number 67 or 52.
52. Robert.
Yep. So the assessment that appears within the Section 35F report itself was in relation to the completely wrong title. So it was a completely erroneous representation. It did not respond to the representation, which was actually another title. Having done an assessment of that, and it's a matter of whether or not you consider that the principles have been applied consistently, the recommendation was that that actually be rural rather than landscape conservation. You may take a different view and say, well, we don't agree that those principles were applied correctly. However, there wasn't a change in his regional assessment because it was a completely different title. So the Tasmanian Planning Commission will ask us to be addressing all these anomalies if they identify them as part of the pre-hearing process. Mm-hmm. So just to explain that one.
Thanks for that
the other one, which was...
So just to clarify, so after the representations went in and we made adjustments based on those representations, if the correct number had been assigned to this correct CT, that would have been the way it would have gone.
Yep.
Okay.
So in respect of 81, it was identified that and I can't give you the representation numbers in front of me, but there were two representations of land surrounding and adjoining this property, which determined that the whole, there are a number of titles that were zoned landscape conservation. It determined that it wasn't the right zone for that land and that it should have been rural in the first place. It certainly wasn't identified originally for landscape conservation, and those representations identified the property in 81 as also going to landscape conservation. So there was a direct conflict. On assessment of it based on that conflict, it was suggested that it goes from landscape conservation to rural, otherwise you'll be having a spot landscape conservation zone in amongst rural zones.
Rural living, is it? Or rural?
Rural.
It says here be zone rural living rather than landscape conservation.
So yes, so in the matters raised, they wanted it to be zoned rural living rather than landscape conservation. The Planning Authority response and recommended action is to zone it rural, not rural living.
Oh, that's very different.
Well, to the extent as I just explained, that all other titles around it have been moved from landscape conservation to, you can see the title references in the recommended action. So there will be no landscape conservation zone up there. If this one to remain landscape conservation, it would be a sole spot zone.
What? Yeah, Campbell, yeah, no. Jenny had a hand up. Yes. I still, sorry, I still don't quite understand. So are you saying, Matt, that all the titles here listed on the bottom were all rural, and this particular one was an anomaly in the report?
No.
So how would that be spot zoning if all of those were landscape conservation?
So the assessment that was done on that area was that it would that landscape conservation wasn't the appropriate zoning, and that it was more appropriate to zone to rural. This title, which is 49931/1, was noted as an anomaly because it was included as a property to zone to from landscape conservation to rural, and yet the assessment was in conflict with that. So having reviewed the assessment, it was brought into line with the properties around.
Okay, yes. I'm still puzzled. I mean, several of the, as per my email to councillors earlier today, several of these properties that are listed here, and one at least is completely bush. Most of the others meet the LCZ criteria. As you've said here, that they are isolated, which suggests that if we allow the sorts of development to happen that is permitted under the new rural as opposed to the rural resource, we would be obliged as a council to maintain the services and infrastructure to those isolated places. And we've also used completely different wording under the planning authority response than we've used in the rest of the section 35F. We've gone completely away from the ERA wording and the principles that we agreed in our workshop. And we're talking now about negligible scenic values and landscape value mapping, even though we've acknowledged that we haven't undertaken that particular strategic assessment, and that we used certain criteria in lieu of having done those assessments, and that was such things as 80% native vegetation, and the fact that it's wattles or it doesn't have a threatened fauna or flora is irrelevant in that case. I mean, we seem to be backtracking on the principles that we agreed, and that worries me. You know, this wording opens up a complete can of worms for the valley, I think, and it bothers me. Yeah.
Through to you.
Through you, Mayor. The difficulty that we have is that if you're accepting that the current 81 as it's currently presented within the Section 35F report is correct, you're also accepting an anomaly in respect of numbers 67 and another one, as unfortunately I just cannot get this to open, which have said otherwise. So you would be accepting an inherent inconsistency within the report. So the purpose of this clarification is to make it extremely clear that all those titles are moving from landscape conservation to rural.
In that case, Mayor, if I may, then I suggest we use the wording that we've used in assessing other ones, rather than the wording here, which suggests we're changing the way we're responding to applications.
Through you, Mayor. Now I'm just getting this opened up. It is the exact same wording that is reflected in 67 and the other representation.
But not in many of the others.
Simply because it's each property is assessed on its own merits.
Councillor Jessup. Microphone on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Chambers-Smith was confusing the two representations when speaking about Wattles, by the way. Number 81, is that because those titles are production forest or have forest practices plans over them? Why have they all converted to rural? I'm sort of asking the same question. I'm interested in what was unique about those titles that converted them to rural.
Through you, Mayor, I'll refer you to the Planning Authority response in the attachment. The property is in comparatively isolated area of the Huon Valley, surrounded by predominantly forestry land. This lot was not included in the original set of Planning Authority proposed landscape conservation properties. The Planning Authority therefore has no objection with it being rural, and on reflection, the adjoining properties earmarked as landscape conservation should be changed to rural as their negligible scenic values and landscape value mapping is somewhat coarse, with larger clear areas and some silviculture included as native vegetation. And the recommended action identifies all those titles that they're talking about.
My understanding, Mayor, is that there's quite a bit of production forestry in that area, and it's not. I think rural is the appropriate. I think the required title. I think for those sort of properties. I think. Thank you, Mr. Grimsey.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification there. So,
Yes.
in council's original one, these were all put in as LCZ. Is that right? And then after the representations, all of them got changed except for 81, and now we're updating 81 to be with the rest.
So
Is that correct?
Yep.
Through you, Mayor, 81 was identified as part of the change of all of them, but when they've done an individual assessment of 81 without considering the ones around it, so you have a direct anomaly in that assessment.
Is it a, is it another, you can't ask another question? So, yeah. Unless you've got a statement.
Opened a loophole for me, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Just a comment then that the Harts View one, it is a little bit puzzling. I mean, they obviously have a whole number of contiguous titles there. This particular one, I looked it up on, well, I looked all these up on List Map. It's a smallish title and it's completely covered in vegetation, so it's hard to imagine why that would ever be zoned rural.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Just in a quick response to that, that's certainly the assessment. If you believe that assessment is not correct and hasn't been applied properly, it's a decision for the council as to what approach you want to go with it.
Okay, so at the moment, we have the amended recommendation that Councillor Armstrong has moved. So, are there any other? Yep.
I think we haven't actually listed the principles that, just for the public,
Yep.
because there's been a lot of concern about this.
So you want me to read it out?
I think it would be really good to just let the public know what principles we want to follow for the process going forward.
You want to read that?
Where they are in the 35F report, which is on the agenda. I think it's page 10, maybe?
Through you, Mayor, so to provide some clarification for those who are watching and within the gallery tonight, the attachment which can be found on Council's website is in relation to agenda item 10.003/23, where Council has specifically considered the difficulties associated with the application of the landscape conservation zone in the Huon Valley. As a consequence, the Council as a planning authority will proceed to the hearing on the Section 35F report, taking into account the following principles and application of the landscape conservation zone. A, while the Council has applied the stated criteria, where evidence is provided to the hearing that demonstrates the property title is not consistent with that criteria, then application of the landscape conservation zone may not be the appropriate zone and an alternative zone will be considered. B, the council has not taken into account current use of the land to the extent that there is potential loss of amenity for an existing landowner by transitioning from the current Zone 2 Landscape Conservation Zone. In particular, application of Landscape Conservation Zone may have been applied to operational rural properties and therefore is likely in some circumstances to limit farming practices. To suggest that a landowner relies upon existing use rights does not provide any certainty of use of the land. As a result of existing use and development, there are many land titles where the application to the entire title would be incongruous to the existing use and development of the land, and there are many circumstances where application to the LCZ would be justified for part but not to the entirety of the property. In these circumstances, the Council requests consideration of the application of split zoning to protect the necessary landscape values whilst not restricting use of the land that has no landscape values, or the application of an alternate zone with reliance on the natural values and scenic protection codes over the relevant portions of the land, the subject of landscape values.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
So, Mayor,
There we go.
referring to
Yep.
page 20 of the attachment, Council has acknowledged the assessment of agricultural potential in the Huon Valley is difficult due to a range of factors. As is the case with the Landscape Conservation Zone, topography, land size, existing development and the mixed farming, native vegetation of titles all makes this a complex and almost case-by-case analysis. Council's apply guideline number 1 for application in the agriculture zone. However, Council acknowledges that a detailed assessment of agricultural potential or constraints has not been carried out. The high value of land per hectare on smaller titles is not adequately considered. The existing use and infrastructure on titles has not been taken into account, and there was no ground testing of the proposed agricultural zoning titles.
Okay. Yes.
Clarification, Madam. Once we vote on the amendment, do we then get to speak to the amended motion, or do we have to speak now or hold our peace?
We referred you to.
So through you, Mayor, the motion is the amended recommendation. So that is what you are discussing now.
Yeah.
So the full, okay. This is it. So I will say something.
Well, you've got something to say, Councillor Jessup?
Surprisingly, Mayor. I am in a very difficult position with this motion. I've grave concerns about the LPS and the 35F. The consultants who wrote it, and who have largely been driving the process, in my opinion, have not based their considerations on the vision of the valley that the ratepayers have, and neither have they had any direction from the previous council, who offered little for the majority of the process. I was voted in by many people who hold rural and agricultural heritage of the valley very dearly, and in my opinion the LPS lacks many of these fundamental values. The LCZ in particular is based on, in my view, locking up potential future production land, although I acknowledge we have actually made some noteworthy considerations of how we can avoid that. The criteria LCZ1, which requires property to be 80% vegetated and either have a scenic or natural asset overlay, is clearly an overreach. The Commission has repeatedly said that LCZ is not for the protection of biodiversity or natural assets. That's what the codes are for, and that's why we have enforcement officers who, in my understanding, are not averse to enforcing code breaches in the Huon Valley, and nor should they be averse at doing that. I've read the responses in the 35F where the consultants have ignored ground-tested evidence that show properties do not have 80% vegetation coverage. Yet this evidence has been ignored, and the new criteria of rolling hills has been used. In my view, ratepayers invested time and money to prepare their representations on the basis of what council officers said, that it was 80% natural vegetation. And it's disingenuous that the 35F then basically has a modified criteria, in my view. We have by far the largest number of LCZ in any LPS so far approved by the TPC or even recommended. We have twice the number of our friends in Kingborough. It's my grave concern that half of the 3,000 proposed LCZ titles came from rural resource properties. In Kingborough, we had less titles, but only about 10% from rural resource. Most of them were environmental living zones, which are recognised as having possibly some environmental asset. I acknowledge the new principles have gone some way with the agricultural and landscape conservation zoning. My concern is that by voting this through, we're endorsing a flawed document and then passing the responsibility to fix this problem to the ratepayers and representatives, possibly at their cost, at considerable cost in some cases. But by not supporting it, we place council and ratepayers at risk of the Planning Commission, and this is my last point, Mayor, taking over the process, which will then alienate us from the process as well. So I do feel that I've backed against a wall with a gun at my head. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other? Yes? I know this is, because this is an issue that we're all talking about, I'm freely going to let you talk.
I'd just like to thank Matthew and for the work he did with those principles. I think that it's really makes a good pathway forward and a good process forward. So with those principles in place, I'm happy to support the amended recommendation.
Yes, Councillor O'Neill.
Good one. Just like to support Councillor Jessop's comments, and I'm nervous about this process as well, but I also realise if we reject it, we're probably putting ourselves out of the process and probably putting the council at financial risk. So I just hope the process can keep our landowners and ratepayers happy, and not devalue their land. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Councillor. You can close.
Oh, I can close. Oh, that's me.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's if. Is there anybody else that has any other, anything else to say on this issue? I mean, this as, yes, would you like to? Yes.
I really just wanted to say thank you to all of the councillors, because we did it, and I do appreciate Matthew helped us a lot, but we all, toss things around, and I think these principles will help. I understand there are errors, but the amount of work that's gone into this already, is incredible, and I think that these principles will help the process to actually put things into context and to actually highlight what the community has told us, and that's what we're trying to do, is to reflect the community's concerns. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And I'd like to say before I hand over to Councillor Armstrong, is that this has been a long process, and as much as Councillor Jessop didn't think we contributed in the last council, we did. He wasn't here to see. So, and I respect the fact that I know that there has been a lot of work done on the outside, and a lot of heartache for lots of people that feel that they have been not treated the way they wanted to be. I also want to make sure that our council staff, they're doing the job that they were given to do. And I know that at times people can get upset about different things, but the bottom line is here, council staff are not here to make things harder for other people. I mean, they've got families, majority of people live here as well. So, yeah, that's all I'd like to say. So, Councillor Armstrong, would you like?
So, pretty much all of what everyone's just said, but I think too, people do need to know that this has been an ongoing issue for like 8 years or thereabouts. It's not a new development. It hasn't happened yesterday. It probably shouldn't have happened. The state probably shouldn't have imposed it when they did, how they did. It's probably the most biased, unfair system ever. And I think the public need to know too that we have worked really hard on this, and we've had some very robust conversations about it, and Matthew's been excellent, as has everybody else. We're not going to please everybody all the time, but the aim is to please the majority most of the time and hopefully get the ball rolling in a really positive manner. And I think as long as we can just have some fluidity across the board, and if we have to kind of pinch a bit here to make that better there, but basically it sticks to the same principles, I think that is probably the best that you can hope for in a region, you know, as diverse as ours. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. So, I would now, as there's no councillor to speak against it at the moment, then I put the amended recommendation, put the motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. I advise that the council is no longer acting as a planning authority as at Number 11, general reports. Is there any councillors tabling their activities tonight?
I'd like to table my activities for November and December 2022.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So 11.01/23 recommendation. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. So do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period of 1 to the 31st of December 2022 be received and noted? Councillor Armstrong, seconded. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to speak to any of those? No? Okay. Is there anyone to speak against the motion? No? Are there any questions? No? As there was no councillor to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. 12, council workshop. General Manager, would you like to advise of the workshops that have been held?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So on the 19th of December, we had the Community Vision and Land Use Development Strategy Project, LUDS. Discussion was held regarding the Community Vision and Land Use Development Strategy Project. On the 11th of January, the 35F report, a discussion took place on the Section 35F draft report to go to the January Council meeting. On the 18th of January, there was an organic waste collection and processing phase 1 workshop, supported by our waste avoidance and resource recovery strategy 22 to 25 and the climate change strategy part A. Council engaged consultant RMCG to undertake an investigation of potential options and the feasibility of a curbside food organics and garden organics FOGO service and associated processing of the organic wastes. Stage 1 of this investigation comprised of initial scoping, high-level analysis of potential options. The output of this analysis is a report outlining demographic considerations, volumes of organic waste and associated costs and GHG emissions and options for education and engagement, curbside FOGO and organics processing. In this workshop, RMCG will present their findings and recommendations for curbside FOGO and organics processing. There was discussion of the options available and where a focus for stage 2, detailed options and analysis of shortlisted options. We also had a Reconciliation Action Plan session. Through our Reconciliation Action Plan working group, Council has been working towards strengthening relationships with local Aboriginal organisations and communities. The early focus has been on developing Aboriginal cultural awareness and improving cultural safety in the workplace. Council's Reconciliation Work Group briefly shared their journey, and senior staff from CTAC, the South East Tasmania Aboriginal Centre, shared how they work with community, local issues and their plans. Discussions followed about how Council can best provide support.
Thank you. Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mayor. And look, this is a question I noticed, and a comment. The FOGO report...
I hadn't got to that quite yet, but the question's on notice. Well, that was my next...
Not yet. No, it's about these.
Okay.
The FOGO report, I think, was excellent and really good work. Is that published by us? And is there... I don't think there's anything commercial in confidence in it that would cause it not to be published, but can I ask maybe through you, Mayor, that the General Manager considers letting the public see that, because I think that would make them realise that we are actually thinking pretty seriously about some of this stuff already. And the same as the reconciliation report as well that I have somewhere here. I'm assuming we're going to make that public as well. That's an excellent document as well. Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. Thank you. We'll take that on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you. Okay, so councillor questions. 13.1. Questions taken on notice. There was no questions on notice. 13.2. Councillor questions without notice. Councillors, are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick one, I hope. A couple of times I've raised the issue of whether Huon Valley Council, as the LGA, is notified by STT under the provisions of the Forestry Practices Code of imminent harvesting operations in its municipality. Because under the Forest Practices Code, it's meant to give 30 days notice of harvesting operations. And as you know, the people adjoining the Mount Tonga Taboo Coop were only given 1 day notice, less than 1 day. It should be 30 days, and the LGA is also meant to be notified. And I haven't received a response to my question about whether we receive those, what we do with them, whether they're available to the public or to councillors.
Okay, thank you very much. Through you, General Manager.
I'm not aware personally, so I'll just have to take that on notice and come back to you, Jenny, unless Matthew are aware.
Through you, Mayor, historically we receive them and they're referred to infrastructure services because that's the greatest impact that forestry has on
Is
our
on
roads.
the roading, yeah. And, yeah,
Through you, Mayor, also NRM receive.
NRM.
So if somebody wanted to access them, they could go through Lockie or the director, or
Through you, back to you. Would that be a request for information, or you mean, like?
how would we know as councillors that those have been issued? May we request to see those? Are they available for councillors to see if they want to find out what's going on?
I would have to...
Maybe we can find out about that. Can we come back to you on that one? Yeah? Yeah, if that's all right. Yeah, and we can let you know. Yes, Councillor Temby?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, getting back to the General Manager report, I really appreciate the detailed report that you provided. It was excellent. Just with regards to the vacancies, as at 31 December 22 to 21 positions vacant. And so you've got a high level of high volume of recruitment processes happening at the moment. Is that something that we could look at with regards to a workshop, just looking at that strategy to see if councillors can work together with you on staffing and recruitment and incentives, and a lot of the initiatives that that the managers have actually put forward are really good ideas, but maybe we can workshop how we can actually, I guess, create a better place to work, you know. That's what we all want to achieve.
I believe, and I'll pass through the General Manager, but I believe that isn't the role of a councillor, but I will pass that over to the General Manager. And yeah.
So I'm just trying to bring that back to the report. So is that the staff recruitment that you're referring to?
Well, I'm not sure whether it was actually the General Manager report or the Human Resource report. I think I'm looking at all of the reports, and I'm just putting all that information together. I'm saying that that your report was very detailed, and I appreciated that. And then also I noted that there's a high level of vacancy, and we've got this launch of people strategy to highlight areas of employee life cycle improvement, the learning management system, you've got the OCI, the organisational cultural inventory. So these are all things that are great, but from a strategic upper level, I guess, we can help perhaps support some of the management ideas, such as, I've written it down, but I can't see it in all of the things that I've written. It was with regards to incentives for being more assertive, or, you know, to actually achieve the sort of things that we're hoping to achieve for the staff. So, you know, there could be innovative ways, such as using the local business community to actually see if we can actually provide some incentives for achieving certain goals. These are the sort of things that we could look at in a workshop situation from a strategic budgeting position, to encourage the idea of being an employer of choice, because we do need to attract staff and retain good quality staff and reward good staff. It's important, and I've identified it as a problem. I mean, it's obviously a problem for lots of councils, but I'd like us to attract better staff. Thanks.
Yeah, look, I think we're definitely looking at working through our people strategy, so I've shared that with you this afternoon. And you know, one of those elements is how we do attract, retain, and develop our people. I think over the last few months we've attracted some really strong talent, and that complements a lot of strong talent that we already have. I think the challenge we've had as an organisation over a fairly substantive period has been the amount of opportunity and investment in our learning and development, our culture, our leadership, and pleasingly that was recognised in the last budget cycle. So I look forward to working with you all regarding our people strategy. We will obviously reconnect as we make our way through the development of that. It will be important to see continued development. We're working, and as you alluded, as is everyone else, in a very tight supply market around the people side. And you know, if we want to keep our good people, then you know, we do have to look after them and ensure they get that development support. So yeah,
Yep.
really look forward to your support, Kat.
Yep. I think on that one, we have so much at the moment that we need to do that's within our council ream. Fitting a workshop in for that, I think, is going to be hard in the next soon anyway. And this is happening every day as far as that goes. Staff is a problem in every organisation at the moment. There's organisations that have 50 vacancies in the valley, so just in one area. So we have a shortage. When we have an unemployment rate at what we have today, yeah, it makes it hard to getting people to, and people use that as leverage in higher jobs, I suppose. They will look for, depends on how much money you want to pop in the budget. We already get, crucified for our wage bill. Yes.
I guess I was trying to say, it's that recognition and celebration that the managers have identified.
Yeah.
And it does, and if we can help to create that atmosphere where we do value the amazing staff that we already have and attract more really good staff.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be wage.
Monetary.
I mean, it can be the culture of the organisation and also recognition in, for example, a sporting event, or an accommodation, holiday or something. There could be other ways of incentivising rather than competing against others with regards to salary. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm harking back a little bit to the 35F that has now been approved and will go to the Commission and will be now publicly advertised. I understand that the GM has now twice rejected the offer of the briefing by the Huon Valley Zoning Association. And that was on the basis of that they may have undue influence in the process. However, I think with the identification of the errors that the consultants have allowed in the report, it's quite clear that I think they do have some value to add to the process. So I'm just asking, Mayor, if you would consider asking the General Manager to reconsider that maybe himself and the Director of Governance and Strategy and Sustainable Development meet with this group to maybe identify some of the other errors and concerns, which I'm quite sure they will take to the Commission, and I don't want us to be off-footed by that when we go to the Commission and find that a local community group with no professional expertise has made us look silly.
I think
that's my question.
That, yeah. Make us look silly, I think. Yeah, it's probably. But I will pass that through to the General Manager, and do you think we'll take that on notice, or you want to answer that one? Go for it.
Look, we've certainly not denied any involvement in the conversation. We've kept the conversation open, I think it's fair to say. It isn't about actually denying just one. What we've got to do is, if anything, open it up to everyone. So that has been the principle that we've had the challenge with. So if we open it up to one association to have feedback on, and then we need to, in an equitable sense, make sure that we open it up to the whole community. So that's been the feedback and continues to be the feedback. I think what we've done over the course of the last few days is picked up the feedback that they've provided around errors, and we've brought that in and made sure that those things are factually reflected. But the same principle is going to be at play around the fact that if we open it up to one association, we then have to open it up to everyone. Otherwise, we're going to get criticism, and you will all get criticism equally for not opening it up more broadly.
Okay. Do you have any other? No? All right. 13.3, Councillors' Notices of Motion. Councillor Thorpe, you have a motion. Would you like to read it out, please? And I will call for a seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I move that the Huon Valley Council declare a climate change emergency and commits it will strategically respond to this. B, acknowledges that this requires urgent action from all levels of government, including local government. C, commits to working with all levels of government and relevant stakeholders in taking actions on climate change, including mitigation adaptation initiatives. D, acknowledges that the unavoidable impacts of climate change pose an immediate threat to the social, economic and environmental viability of the municipality. E, all council strategies, when developed or reviewed, take into consideration the impacts of climate change. F, the Huon Valley Council re-establishes the Community Climate Change Advisory Group to provide council with specific advice on actions council can take within its direct operations and community to reduce the impacts of climate change, adapt to the changing climate and mitigate the impacts on the municipality. G, the Huon Valley Council develop and annually review a climate change action plan, mitigation strategy and adaptation strategy. H, the General Manager report on the Council's current activities to address climate change at the next ordinary meeting of Council in February 2023. I, that a report on Council's actions on climate change be included in the Council's annual reports that follow this motion. J, the General Manager provides Council with an overview of built infrastructure that requires modification and improvement to meet current and future climate change risks. K, the General Manager coordinates a feasibility study to install solar and energy efficient technology on Council-owned buildings. L, the General Manager coordinates a feasibility study to consider Council delivering a community solar bulk buy scheme. And M, the Council work towards increased bushfire resilience by supporting effective land use planning and specific strategies such as bushfire planning, managing fire breaks and Indigenous culture burning practices through our NRM responsibilities.
Okay. So then I put that to the, that's just then, a seconder. Do I need I need a seconder? Councillor Temby? All right. Councillor, yes, Thorpe? God. Would you like to speak on your motion?
Yes, Mayor. Just have some few comments to make. I'm sure we all know that climate change is a serious issue and risk that the world is facing, and that urgent action is required to avoid the worst impacts of climate change on our own local community. The reason for this motion is due to the clear effects of climate change affecting local government areas like ours all across Australia. We know that climate change affects every community in different ways. That includes here in Tasmania and all across the country, so taking individual local government action to adapt and mitigate the impacts is vital. I know the council have already taken first steps in doing this. I also just wanted to touch on the adaptation and mitigation components of this, which I consider an important factor when considering this motion from an organisational, operational perspective. In particular, these components could mean preparing for things like rising insurance premiums and liability issues into the future, financial sustainability, so the actions taken today to avoid larger costs in the future, duty of care issues, strong community expectation that we take appropriate action, and the multiple benefits of adaptation responses such as improved health and wellbeing, lower energy bills, lower maintenance costs, etc. In other parts of this motion, there are recommendations that community groups have raised at places like the AGM and also had conversations over some time in our community. And those include like the inclusion of the climate change actions being reported in our annual report and the establishment of the Community Advisory Group on Climate Change. I just want to note and thank these groups for their input and dedication to working within our community to address these issues. I'm also aware of the General Manager comment that in the suggestions in this motion, the agenda that require allocation of budget to fulfil a role of a climate change officer. I just wanted to also mention a climate change officer is a position standardised by other councils in Tasmania and across Australia, so this would not be a new position to a council and would also assist with the growing workload of climate-related tasks that council would continue to face. Local governments are on the front line of dealing with these impacts and should also be on the front foot in taking appropriate action. We know existing climate impacts are already more frequent and more intense than previous decades in our own community, and without actions, these can continue and will continue to increase in frequency and intensity. So with that in note, I've moved this motion as our next step to continue to take appropriate actions that protect and stand up for the economic, social and environmental values we hold unique here in the Huon Valley.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Have I got some? Yeah, yes, Councillor Jessup? Yes.
If it's acceptable to the mover and seconder, can they just accept the amendments and it becomes substantive, Mayor?
Through you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, just typically associated with notice of motions, it's best to do a separate amendment.
Yep.
Okay. I'll do a separate amendment then, if I may. And let me commence by saying I have a great concern about the term climate change emergency, but I know that is important to some parts of the community. I know it's also a red rag to a red bull to many of the others, so we're just going to have to live with that. So I'm not going to amend that first line as much as I sort of want to. My amendments are to C, and so I did just manage to get this printed out by council staff before I walked in the door. And I've sort of tried to take all the emails. It's been excellent, the amount of emails that we've had floating around about this. So C, and I think this came from Councillor Chambers-Smith, that rather than stakeholders, we expand that to community, businesses and experts. On point C, I've highlighted that for councillors. Point D, we add including through but not limited to the effects of extreme weather events. I think climate change is not just extreme weather events, there's a whole range of economic and other issues that go on. I think we replace E and we agree to take into consideration the impacts of climate change in all current and forthcoming strategies, policies and work plans. I do understand that will create a workload for staff, but I'm trying to leave it vague enough for staff to manage that. G, adding that, and again regarding the community climate change, we bring back terms of reference, discuss and agree to terms of reference for the advisory group in the April ordinary meeting of council. H, small minor change at the beginning, receives report. And I thank Councillor Gibson for bringing the Part A strategy to my attention, that a number of these objectives are already detailed. So I think we need to make sure that is there. So with specific reference to Huon Valley Council's Climate Part A mitigation and a summary of the budget allocations required to, sorry, can I just delete summary of budget allocations full stop? I'll just delete those two lines because I bring them a bit further down. I is same, J same, K same, L same, M same, but then actually add a point. I do not believe we should be looking at this budget allocation outside of our budget cycle. It is going to be an important part of our budget, so I think we need to include it in the budget cycle. So point N really is this: the council in its budget planning cycle this year gives strong consideration to making available funds to appoint a climate change officer and to produce the Part B adaptation document for the Huon Valley Council's strategic plan in the 23-24 financial year, and to complete other tasks as outlined in this motion.
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to Councillor Jessop's?
Can I just get a clarification? What was the H? Which lines were you cutting out?
I've noticed I've duplicated here in my cut and paste the bit that says required to employ a climate change officer to fulfil the duties of this motion and other council's activities. That's made redundant by N, effectively. So I just delete from required.
From required.
Yep.
Yep.
Point of clarification as well, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Camp-Smith.
It appears to be, is that the same, is that right, apart from N, to Toby's amended motion? Am I getting that wrong?
The yellow.
You've got quite a lot of yellows here, but they appear to be in Toby's.
So Toby doesn't have an amended motion because
No.
he must
He's
move
I
this. You see.
see. So you had to.
You've called me out, Jenny. I have plagiarised terribly in this.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yes,
Right,
that's
okay.
it's
Thank you.
Toby's motion. Yes, okay.
Well, with some of my thoughts, thank you,
Yes,
Mayor.
Councillor Temby. Yes. Oh, well, no, we didn't have a seconder.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. 'cause
I'll
you asked
second
the
it.
question. Yeah. Councillor Gibson, thank you very much. Now, because I haven't got that in here, so, do you wish to speak to that before we go any further? Councillor, that's correct, isn't it? Yes. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's correct. So back to you, Councillor Jessop.
Yes, look, Mayor, thank you. I have been called out. I am a chameleon trying to blend together a whole range of thoughts here,
Yep.
because I think it is very important that we as a group of councillors, some of us are not going to like everything in this, and I've named myself up in not liking the crisis type language. I live in that world in work, in real day-to-day crises, but this is a significant concern for the future of our valley, of our children, and, well, not my children, but of other people who have kids and their grandkids. And what I liked about this motion to start with is it has some real actions rather than just beating our chest and saying there's a crisis. It starts moving us in a direction, and I commend the amendment to the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, now you, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for your amendments, and thank you for your motion, Councillor Thorpe. My understanding is that the climate change strategy Part B is already in progress. So that is the Director of Infrastructure, Climate and Environmental Services is saying that he's getting that to be completed by this year, or?
Yep.
So that's already underway, isn't it? And it's incorporating each department, actions within each department, how climate change can affect each and every aspect of our council life.
That's correct. Thank you. Any other? Yes, councillor.
Yeah, just a little just to add on to Cathy, what Cathy was saying. I mean, my understanding is that whilst Plan B is underway, there's no real resources allocated to it. So I think it's really important in here that we do, make those resources available. We commit to doing that as part of our 2023 budget cycle.
Yeah.
And I think it is very important to have a climate change officer, because while everybody needs to take climate change into account in the process of their work, you need a central point within council that's a repository of knowledge. It's an advisory point. They do the monitoring and the measuring, and they're pushing people to do do the right things. And I think without that commitment, we wouldn't get by. But I do question the need for J, K, L and M, because I think a lot of those are covered in the Plan A that we've done, and I would suggest they would be best left to a workshop on the development of Plan B, so that we work through exactly what we need to do as a municipality. Not that I have anything against any of these particular things, I just think perhaps they're not appropriate for this particular motion. But thank you.
Would you
Can I
look
ponder
at?
that, Nick? Can I
Yes.
ponder that while we get any other?
Well, is there any other, anyone else to speak? Oh, coughing, so please go first. Yes.
Well, I mean, I think this is fantastic. I've been waiting to move a climate change emergency motion for 4 years, so I'm really pleased that Toby's put this forward. I think it's great. I've spoken to a few of the other councils who have done it, and they are very clear that having an officer is critical to making it happen. In fact, Hobart City is advertising for 2 at the moment, a senior and a junior climate change. And I think that this is the way things are going to unfold into the future. There's a lot of work to do, and once we start moving into it, we'll see that that's necessary. So I think that N is critical. I did in what the email to and fro, we had a different wording, and I was wondering if I could put it back to Councillor Jessup, rather than saying give strong consideration to. I'd prefer to see prioritises, because that's what was there before.
N.
This is N. In the budget cycle, give strong consideration, in my opinion, it's a consideration, but prioritising is saying, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to.
Can I suggest then maybe give strong consideration to prioritising the funds to a point? Because I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a tussle between, do we fix a road or do we...
Well, that's the tussle that I don't want, I guess, because I think that this is such a big issue that if it comes down to a tussle between those things, then this whole motion falls flat because there's no action behind it.
But from a governance point of view, I don't really want to fetter our budget.
Prioritising, I don't think, does fetter the budget. It just means that we're making a commitment to prioritise that, rather than just saying we're going to consider it.
So
it would read that Council, in its budget planning cycle this year, prioritises making available funds to appoint a climate change officer.
Yeah, look, I can live with... And
you're the
seconder
mover, I'm
anyway,
the seconder.
so yeah, I can live with that one.
Yeah.
And again, I think we need to be clear that we're all going to have to discuss the budget.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway.
Got to make it affordable.
And Mayor oh, sorry, Paul. Yep.
Yes. I don't know what else there is to say, but action is what's required. There's lots of... I did want, in one of my suggested amendments, I did want to emphasise that we need to actually do some carbon accounting in all of the decisions we make, because, you know, we've already just making a decision to go with FOGO, which is a big climate change decision and really positive move. But you need to know whether that is more important than electrifying the fleet, or whether it's better to move to smaller cars, Toyota Corollas rather than big Ford Rangers in the fleet, or whatever. So all of these things, you know, are important, but I guess if we have an officer, that's the sort of thing that they're going to.
I'm thinking that, Part B.
Yes, it's all a part of the Part B.
We've seen what a waste officer has done with the number of rubbish bins that have come through the building. I'm happy to go back to Councillor Chambers-Smith, her motion, and maybe a way to solve that is we have the motion in two parts. So part one is everything except JKL&M, and then part two is council staff consider the following in the development of strategies, and then we basically just put JKL&M in there. So it's putting the substance of the motion and then saying these are some of the things that we'd really like you to look at amongst all the other stuff. And if you wanted to think about a carbon accounting thing in that, but I suspect a climate change officer would have their carbon abacus out all the time, I suspect.
And I think that the things that are talking about that in JKL&M will be...
They're actions, absolutely, and you would hope they would be considered
come
anyway.
out with strategy.
and that comes before us, and we get to...
Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
And we're giving a bit of a shove because I think these have been, the infrastructure has been a major discussion during the debate. Solar and is passionate for some people, and the bushfire, I think, came from Councillor Temby, and you don't have to go very far to talk to people who are very concerned about our mitigation for bushfire. So I'm happy to sort of park them slightly to one side, but to say they're things that particularly interest us.
I just think it's... leave it as it is. I honestly believe that it's not hurting to be there. I believe that it doesn't matter that it's there.
So you're not saying change it?
No, don't change it. I just think... But I think that Councillor, before she had a coughing fit, wanted to speak.
Oh, yes.
So, you've got your... Yeah.
No, got a frog.
Yeah.
It's the masks. I do not have anything seriously wrong. So, I've got lots of things wrong, but not that. So, it's... The climate change thing is going to evoke a vast divide, because we've got the ones that are just passionate climate change. We've got the ones that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note that when I work, a lot of my really grown-up clientele are very happy to suggest that climate change is real, because they've had 80 years of watching everything change.
Yeah.
And they know that everything's different. My concern with this is dollars.
Yeah.
We get an officer or we get an employee, we pay the employee, that's wonderful, but what ongoing costs? If we're talking about changing council buildings over to, a more acceptable climate change solution, we're going to get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. What about the costs for potential planning development applications, whatnot going forward if they have to switch to a more solar orientated? I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I'm just simply pointing out what might happen. We have to be aware of all of these things going forward, and yes, there's an offset later on. What if they don't have an extra $35,000 to put batteries in a house to start off with? Or $40,000 or whatever else, at the end of the day, it'd be lovely to see a town battery, powering everybody. The thing I suppose I'm getting to is we could pass this and sit on it and not make any definite arrangements, but if we spend a lot of money on this and it doesn't happen or we get it wrong, we will be crucified. We will be crucified. Let's just put it out there. The community will say, there goes another $200,000 on something, potentially that hasn't happened. So if it's a commitment, it has to be a commitment in real words, real terms, small steps moving forward, and it has to work. Because I have a lot of debate about this with my clients, as you can imagine, and they're really passionate either way. I don't want to be crucified, so let's get it right.
Well, I can assure you that as Councillor Gibson will confirm that when we done Part A, it was not a decision that was made lightly. It was a lot of discussion. There was lots of things that we had to compromise on to make an agreement to move forward with it. So
And it's all been
this,
great stuff,
this here,
but
yes,
this
this
is a
here.
bigger
Yeah,
commitment.
it is, but it's also doing what is expected of councils
It is expected.
moving forward. But in here, nothing really says to me that in this motion that we're not already going to do anyway, moving forward.
That's
well,
correct, but
things
it's in
that-
writing, yes.
yes,
But I mean, we also need to be,
Yep.
you know, aware that there's no legislation that says we have to apply by. And I don't like the term climate emergency.
No?
I'm a bit like Mark. I think it sort of gets a lot of people's fleece up. However, we used to call it climate change or global warming, and it was the same thing. It was just a softer term, and I get that it's supposed to evoke alarm in people. That's
Yep.
the whole point of the thing. But, you know, if it's not set in stone and we're not making, you know, we are going to do everything that's in here and it's going to happen and we're blah, 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 we can't really commit 100%, but we can commit to most definitely entertaining the thought process of moving in this direction.
I understand where you're coming from as far as the other part of the community. Because I possibly have members
Yeah.
in my family as
But it's
well.
also not a legislation that local government has to abide by. You know, there's this as well. So we have to be thinking we are actually taking on a community passionate debate and a community passion action, but it doesn't really come under something that we have to do as a local government. And that's not saying I don't agree with it, because I do, but I'm speaking from the other side of the coin.
This is what good debate's all
Yes.
about. Yes, councillor. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think this is a whole lot more than ideology. I mean, we've heard from our Director of Infrastructure in the past about the importance of having to factor in climate change into all future infrastructure. So that's already an expense that we're having to. I mean, we've already talked recently about the need to properly do the culverts on private driveways, etc. I mean, so all these things are going to keep coming up and up, and if we don't put those, you know, mitigation builds into practice, you know, we will also be, you know, under an extreme amount of fire. And I think by making this commitment, by saying we recognise this is happening, it is serious, we're actually putting the well-being of our community, you know, uppermost, and we're helping our staff to get the, you know, the urgency to do things that they need to do to mitigate, you know, the effects of severe weather events in the future.
Look, thank you. I mean, it's all, yes, you would like something? Yep.
Just like to quickly respond as well. First off, I'm actually quite proud of the debate we've had to date, because it's been very positive and inclusive, and I think most of us have made an inclusion to this motion. In terms of legislation response to climate change, there's probably no legislation that legislates the responsibility on climate change to government, but I think we could all agree that we're responsible to protecting core values of the municipality and responsibility to responding to risk, and also a duty of care, which I think are all very important aspects to climate change, in the sense of potentially have paths that will become subject to coastal erosion, which might have a duty of care on people that use that in our region, and those sorts of things. So I think these items listed are sort of, they might already be happening in Part A or Part B, but I think it's important to also follow this up with a commitment to actually have core outcomes like funding the climate change officer, whether that be available at this upcoming budget conversations or not. I think it's something that we commit to actually having a conversation about and prioritising as well, but we also don't know what's right around a corner, so we can't preempt that either.
Yep. All right. Okay. Yes, councillor O'Neill. Got it? Yep.
Okay, yep, look, I'm supportive of everything that's been said. Just with employing an environmental duty officer, I think we're very aware that it's going to be a complicated skill set, and is it one job, or is it different? Well, it could be buses and kids going to school and that sort of stuff. It can be a multiple thing, and we've got to get buy-in from the community, and we've got to set targets, and we've got to show that we're meeting something rather than just saying we've got this officer that's doing what. So just be very aware of the duty statement and the skill sets required, and if it's one person or multiple.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Burgess.
I'd just like to put my comments in there as well. I'd like Councillor Jessup and Armstrong, the word emergency kind of stands out there a bit, but I don't think it looks that bad with a small e. It doesn't look that bad at all, actually, and I think it's time that we actually adopted this, and I think it's time that we started to be the leaders in the community.
Yeah, and the simple fact is that we have a RICI, we have a group, a committee that is already there on climate change, and we're not the only council that will be declaring this, and we'll fix the little e. Okay, have we got any? Yes. Yes.
Just a very minor thing. I think that spending some money now is actually going to save us a hell of a lot of money in the future. So it's all about risk mitigation, just in answer to Councillor Armstrong. And I don't really think the word emergency is intended to evoke alarm. It's actually meant to describe the reality of the situation. I think that's what the whole council staff and everybody is aware of now.
Okay. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Just briefly, I appreciate what Councillor Armstrong was saying with regards to equity, and I can't imagine any adaptation plan that is going to be prescriptive. That they will, we as councillors will ensure that we're not going to be imposing any kind of draconian requirements, that we will be cognisant of the concerns and the costs involved and things like that. But yes, I agree with Councillor Gibson that if we don't act now, it will cost more. And so if you want to talk about equity, it is a problem for the poorer people in our community. They will be facing extreme heat and extreme wet and an extreme cold. And it'll be an equity issue for future generations if we don't act now. It already is. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jessup, have you got any, if that's...
Ready to summarise? Thank you, Madam. And I think Councillor Gibson, we can accept a big E. Are you happy with a big E? Yes. So thank you, Councillor Gibson, for your emergency. But on a serious point, I deliberately came into council saying it wasn't going to be the first thing I was going to talk about climate change. But you know, during the campaign, we talked about ruts in roads. We've got a motion here that's going to ask us to spend $1.25 million over the next 5 years fixing infrastructure that is no longer suitable for what we live in now. We've talked about issues around, and I think, to be honest, housing is a climate change issue for us in Tasmania because we've got increased population requirements of people moving away from places that are no longer livable. So I think we do live in a climate affected world, if we want to call it that. And I thank all the councillors for supporting this. I do feel like I've just pinched Councillor Thorpe's motion that I'm having to take the credit for, and if it's good, otherwise I'll just blame Councillor Thorpe. But thank you for your support of the motion.
Thank you. Okay, so is this all discussion we had? I'll propose the motion to move. I was going to correct myself. I'd like to move the amended motion. I'd like to put the amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. So that's it. And now we have to... Yep. So now the amendment becomes a motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's all councillors. Thank you. Well done on that, because that is, yeah. I didn't have my microphone on, sorry about that. Kelly, do you need that done again? Okay, thank you. All right. Whew. Annual General Meeting Resolution Downloading of Development Applications 15.001/23. I'll recommend that you, I put councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? No. Do we need to? Yep, move a motion, yep. Yep. Councillor Gibson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Gibson, do you?
I think this is straightforward. I'm pleased that we're going to have a report on this. I personally think that we should be allowing people to download DAs, but I understand that there's some copyright issues. I'm hoping that Matthew will be able to sort that out for us.
Okay. Is there any questions? Yes, Councillor Temby.
I was just wondering if I can amend the motion or not with a C, which is that council respond to representatives with a copy of the relevant planning report within 2 days to allow them time if they wish to lodge an appeal. So basically, I understand that you've already said that you will respond to them, but if we don't put in a request for a time frame, and they've only got 14 days, so can we put in, I'll repeat it again,
Yep.
C, for council to respond to representatives with a copy of the relevant planning report within 2 days to allow time if they wish to lodge an appeal.
Councillor Gibson.
I'm not sure who the representatives are. I mean, this was an AGM, it was moved. I don't even know if we know from the show of hands who were the people who actually moved that. Or it was put by Secretary. Oh no, it was put by.
I think this
Senior
might be the
Associate.
next.
We might just clarify
Yeah, I
that,
think
if
it
that's
might be the
okay.
next
Yes.
item.
Through you, Mayor, the discussion or the mention of the providing of reports to representatives is the next item, 15.002. I do have a comment on that because there are timeframes within the Act that we comply with, so it's from the date that notice is given, so it actually doesn't affect their appeal period.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Is there any other questions on that? Councillor Jessup?
Ma'am, I'm just, and I hope we are able to sort out the copyright issue, because I think in era of open government, which is what people are demanding that we have, people should be able to see what goes on. But my understanding is that copyright is a commodity that can be sold, traded, or gifted. So I would consider it could be something that could be waived, and maybe that is just something that we have to ask people to do, give them the option to waive it. I don't know if we could compel them to waive it, because that might be seen to be unduly influencing them. But if at least for some we had a box that they could tick, I waive my copyright rights, on the basis that it is then not taken from other people. You can put anyway. So, but you're the legally trained person, Matt, and I just make that as a comment, but I hope we can find a way around that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, did you?
Just as an architect, I'm aware that the design is copyright. Whether somebody copies the drawings or not, that's irrelevant. You can't use them unless you've paid for them. So I don't think that's an issue. And other councils have managed to do it, so I'm sure it's possible.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions? There's no one to speak against the motion, so then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Annual General Meeting resolutions, publication of planning reports on Council's website. 15.002/23. I council to look at the recommendation of that for this report. Do I have a person to move this motion? Recommendation? Good on you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibson. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Armstrong? Okay. Is there any questions on this one? Yes, Councillor Temby?
So can I move a motion? An amendment. Can I move an amendment that C, Council respond to representatives with a copy of relevant planning report within 2 days to allow them time if they wish to lodge an appeal.
You've got that. Councillor Armstrong, would you be happy to add that as, do we have to do a new one or can we just add it as a C?
Through you, Mayor, you can add it as a C, but I certainly want to be giving some advice on this one.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Would you like to hear some advice on that before you accepted C if that recommendation?
So,
thank you.
Through you, Mayor, the requirement under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act is that we have 7 days to notify the developer and the representatives of the decision, and they have the appeal rights which come from the date of notice that they are given notice of the decision, not the date of council's decision. So they are not in any way deprived whatsoever, just simply because of time frame from the council decision.
So we've always got 14 days.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so you no longer want to add your C?
Correct, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any other questions or on that recommendation or motion? Would you like to close and statement?
Yes, I would.
Yes.
So pardon me. Well, I'm glad we got that sorted because I was sort of thinking, well, what, in response to Kathy, I imagine that 14 days would be reasonably flexible as well, wouldn't it? Or they're not?
No, the 14 days isn't reasonably flexible.
It's just 14 days.
It's 14 days, so if they were to seek to lodge an appeal out of time, they have to get leave from the appeal tribunal.
Right, so there's no flexibility. Okay, well, that's it. That's planning, so that's fine.
Yep.
That's okay. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, all right. As there's no one to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present and the motion is carried. Yes. Oh, you've got to leave? Yeah, that's fine. You can, yep. It's not a break. I think we continue on, don't we? Yep. Annual General Meeting resolutions, local provisions, schedule and application of the Landscape Conservation Zone, 15.003/23. Or councillors to look at the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Gibson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Gibson, would you like to speak to this?
So just point of clarification, this part B is just saying we've already done it, is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, effectively,
10.00.
some of the requests that have been made have been dealt with through the response in the Section 35F report.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case, and that's a good response to that request.
Okay. Do I have any other questions on or debate on this one? No? Do you wish to close, councillor?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. As there's no one to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Gibson, Councillor O'Neill, was that your hand up? Councillor Burgess, Councillor Thorpe Armstrong, Temby and Doyle. We have councillor, all those against, yes, yeah, is councillor Jessup, and we don't have councillor in the room. Okay, thank you. Annual General Meeting Resolutions, Public Question Time Procedures, 15.004/23. Do I have a councillor to move this motion? Yep, councillor Gibson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Gibson. Would you like to speak?
I guess I'd just like to say that I'm happy with the way, Mayor, the way you're running question time in an open and generous allotment of time, and I think that this is the way we're going is totally acceptable.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or like on that one? No? Okay. Is no one to speak against the motion? I'll ask those in favour. Please, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Petition to amend seal plans, plan 126919, agenda item 15.005/23. I've got all councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Armstrong. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Canberra-Smith. Councillor Armstrong. Would you like to speak to this?
Probably.
Yep, thank you.
I'm not sure what I'm speaking about, which is probably why I need to speak to you.
Yep, thank you.
Are we filling in a dam? Is that what we're doing? Because the legal jargon did catch me a little bit by surprise with this one, so I'm glad that I got to speak about it.
Thank you.
Please, Matthew.
Can we have, yes, through you, General Manager,
Thank
to
you
your
very
Director, could you like to clarify?
Through you, Mayor, we don't know what the intent is with the future of the dam. It could well be to fill in. Certainly at the moment, some other parties have some rights over the water in the dam, and the owner of the property wants to effectively extinguish those rights.
Do we have any other questions on or statements on that? Yes, Canberra-Smith?
It seems a huge amount of expense for council that we have to have a whole committee and a hearing. Does the person sort of submitting this petition, do they pay for that? Because it shouldn't be something that council has to bear the cost of.
Through you, yeah, to
So
the
I'll
Director.
refer you to paragraph 18 of the report. So we do have fees and charges for preparation costs of $531 and the hearing itself of $1,545. It is something that we need to look at because given the complexity of it, it is unlikely to cover the costs that councils has to do to actually comply with Section 103 of the Act.
So maybe that's when we do fees and charges. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or about that? You can, yes, okay,
Sorry,
yes, go for it.
yeah.
Yep.
So with water and the fact that obviously properties, I know that, you know, dams are a water source for emergency and blah, 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 and whatever, that people have rights to access them and whatnot. Who actually controls water? Does council control the water and the usability from neighbours and whatnot? And is this how does this become a council issue?
Through you, Mayor, the council does not control water. There's a department, or there's an area within the Natural Resource and Environment Department of the state government that deals with water. The reason that council is involved in this is because it is an easement that is shown on a sealed plan. And any amendment to a sealed plan has to be approved by the council.
Yes, anyone else have their hand up on this one? No. Yes?
I remember now. So is there any other way of going about doing this?
Through you to Director?
3M and no.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to close? Have you got a closing statement? No? Okay. So as there's no councillor speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Yeah. Okay, can we do that now? Okay, so one of the, in the recommendation, we have to call for committee members for that. How many?
Through you, Mayor, three
Yep.
committee members.
3, okay. Do I have 3 people?
Can we just ask what the role and responsibilities are of the committee members? Is this some sort of expectation?
Yes, so the procedures as set out in the
Yeah.
resolution.
Yes.
The task of the committee is to make a decision to cause the amendment to be made with or without modification, and require, as a condition of so doing, that any person who benefits the amendment is to make compensation in money or land to a person who is injured by it. So that is the role and function of the committee, having heard the parties. From a hearing perspective, it would probably be a couple of hours, or a morning or an afternoon, so time frame, and then there would be reading associated with it.
Okay, can I, well, I'll put my hand up for that. Yeah, and Councillor Campbell-Smith and Councillor Gibson? No, well, I'm happy to take, would you like to put your hand up, Toby? Okay. You sure? Yep, okay. Yeah, we've got to vote on it then. Yeah. All right, so we've got Councillor Gibson, Councillor Campbell-Smith and Councillor Doyle. And then are we all happy with that?
So if there's no further nominations, they'll be declared elected in accordance with the governance framework.
Okay, we don't have to vote and put our hands up or anything like that? No? Okay. Financial report 16.001/23. The councillors to look at the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Thorpe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jessup. Councillor Thorpe, would you like to talk to this motion? No? Okay. Do I have any questions or? Yes, Councillor Temby?
Thank you, Mayor. I did ask with regards to the contractor expenses for finance and planning of $50,000 and $60,000 respectively, and the additional expenditure of $30,000 of the economic development and community vision, strategic and annual planning. So with regards to the economic development, the spend map, what is a spend map?
Okay, so, yeah.
Through you, Mayor. Spend map analyses expenditure within the Huon Valley, so it demonstrates how much money is spent locally, so by local people with local businesses. It demonstrates how much actually leaves the Huon Valley from local people, and it also demonstrates how much money will come in or does come into the Huon Valley from people who are visiting, and also identifies the sort of areas that they're coming from. So we get a bit of an idea of where we can target, and there will be an update provided in a future General Manager's operational report on some of the statistics that we've found from SpendMap over the last 3 years, which demonstrates from the bushfires effectively, or just before COVID, right through to now.
Thank you, it'll be very useful.
Yeah. Was there 2 parts to your, was it?
Well, I was asking about the finance and planning,
Yep.
what the contractor expenses were with regards to that.
Through you, Mayor, I can respond to the planning. So we've had instances where we haven't had employed development engineering officers. So the contractor amount for the contract development engineers has been paid out of that amount. There is an offsetting balance in the salaries. The other matter is that the contractors for the work done on the Section 35F report is allocated to that, and we are expecting some funds from the state government to offset.
Thank you. Do we have any other? No? Councillor Thorpe? Do you want to any closing? Okay, all right. As there's no one to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Annual General Meeting 2022 resolution regarding the long-term financial plan, 16.002/23. I ask councillors to, the recommendation, do I have a councillor to speak for the motion? I'll move the motion. Councillor Jessup, a seconder. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to speak for the motion?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think the financial reports provided at the AGM were comprehensive, and the long-term financial plan was appropriate. I think we all have a lot of work to do on that, even considering some of the issues we talked about today with infrastructure and stuff, but no, I'm happy for it to proceed as it sits.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or statements? No? As there's no councillor speaking against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Okay. What am I up to? Organisational culture inventory, 16.003/23. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Gibson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to this motion?
I do. I guess I just have a question moving through to the General Manager about the actions going forward, because there's no action at the moment. It's just there's transactions. No, that's fine.
No, you're right. All right.
I think that this is a good process to be going through, and I'd like to see what comes out of it. We need to obviously have this benchmark and then move forward and compare that with future assessments of the situation. Yeah, the culture.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any? Yes, councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do have some questions and sort of overall question marks about this process. Partly I was hoping that we would see some more base data with respect to the particular issues that both different levels of staff and different directorships of staff, their particular concerns. I mean, we know that where they sit on this circumflex from the presentation we had from Adrian, but we don't know what their actual particular concerns were, whether it's overwork, whether it's inflexible hours, whether it's direct management, whatever it may be. And I'd really like to have seen some more, information on that, which is part of our sort of role with, oversight of staff well-being. But I'm still not absolutely clear how, the training within this is going to continue. I haven't seen, a sort of timetable of how this is going to work out, and also whether we plan to, repeat this at some point in the future and do a comparison to see if we've actually improved, and not just as an overall, but are all the different levels of management improving, or of staff, and are all the different areas of work work, improving.
Yeah. Yep, okay. Through to you, General Manager.
Yeah, and good point we're talking about a little bit earlier about, what are the next steps. And so maybe just as a bit of background, we did the survey obviously, and we talked to staff and went through the results with staff, and obviously it's their feedback, so no surprises where we sat. But this is a new tool for the organisation, and so a lot of it was just educating around how this tool is going to be supporting our way forward. There's a lot that came out of the survey. It is fair to say that there's a list of things that people want to see change as part of our culture. So one of the things that we needed to do was, in a sense, prioritise where we were going to work, and rather than a top-down approach as we might have taken in the past, we chose to sort of top and bottom it, and so took the results out and said, well, look, we've got some ideas, but we're keen to understand from staff where they see a need for us to take some action. And so points 28, 29 and 30 are sort of those categories of areas that the teams have recognised that we need to do some work in. The risk of having different parts of the business focus on different things was that we dissipate the focus of what we're trying to achieve. And when we sort of looked at that and went out to the team, they agreed that these categories were the key categories that each department, each work team could see some benefit in having some resource and action and initiatives applied upon. So we categorised into that working together, that recognition, acceleration and addressing workload concerns. Again, they were the three key areas. We have put in place the resource and structure review to be progressed over the next few months. We're looking at that recognition and acceleration in the sense of our awards, and as Kath was alluding to, there's an opportunity for us to understand not just the remuneration part, but what is going to be the things that people want to see in a recognition and award sense. And I guess the other one can be summarised in a communication sense, and how we work together is one of those areas. And so we've talked about some value walks and being able to understand what people do, so going and visiting sites, and not just the general manager or the director, but the managers and team leaders across the business, being able to get out and understand and create relationships, personal connection. In a sense of when do we check that? Look, we've looked at this stage to do something in 18 months, 2 years. So that was the recommendation from Adrian as we went through this process, that he sensed that it's going to take some time for us to change some things. One important part of that is we don't want to get to 18 months or 2 years and not have anything changed. So what we agreed in our last management team meeting is a small working group are going to come up with some pulse indicators that we can test things periodically, and we haven't agreed on a timeline that would then appreciate, are things getting better in a sense of improving, or staying the same, or deteriorating would be a terrible outcome. But we want to understand whether the things we're doing are effective in shifting us out of that green or predominant green into the blue. And we don't want to be surprised when we get 18 months or 2 years and find that we haven't reached that destination. We certainly are, aspiring for that employer of choice status as we make our way through this. One thing's for certain, it's going to take all of us to work on this. So it's not just the exec, or it's not just the managers. It's got to be everyone working for a culture that we want to attract people but retain our people as well. So the idea is we'll recheck in a more formal sense in about 18 months, 2 years. We'll take some pulse checks depending upon the measures that we come up with as a management group, and happy to bring those back to you once they've been established over the next month or so. And then, you know, it comes back to the efforts that we're all going to be working on under those 3 key areas, and making sure that they're the things that are moving the dial for us.
Thank you very much for that. But are there any sort of anonymised feedback mechanisms for staff? I know in organisations I've worked in, sometimes there's been a culture of people saying what they think management want to hear. But if you have some sort of feedback scheme where people can put in an anonymous, not complaints, but just issues that they're facing, or have, you know, it just makes it a lot easier for them. You know, if they don't have to attach a name to it or talk to a manager or a peer, but just a, you know, and you know, I'd like to see something like that here, if that were possible.
Yeah, we can consider that. I think, you know, being integrity and open communication is one of our core values. I'd be disappointed if we didn't have people openly having conversations about the things that are impacting on their day-to-day. So
it happens all the time, you know. You might have a woman who's uncomfortable speaking to a line manager and doesn't know how to express that, or no, that's just one example, but it could be all sorts of ways that people feel uncomfortable about expressing their actual concerns, or they might feel that if they say something negative, it might affect their performance review. You know, so I think it's really important that they have some anonymous mechanism through which they can express. Yeah, you might have a minor or major grievances they may have.
No, I'm happy to explore that with the people team and see what we can come up with.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Yeah, I agree. I think anonymous feedback is important. With the pulse surveys, are we able to receive the information about those, the results of those pulse surveys as well as councillors?
Just for clarity, I might have said surveys, but we haven't confirmed their surveys. It was just a pulse check. So it may not be, you know, something in a sense a survey. I've left it, as we have as a management team, left it to that working group to come up with the ways they see us being able to measure that. So, you know, whatever it is, I'll circle back to you, and, you know, ultimately we'll want to make sure we're on track, and we'll want to share with you that we're on track. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you. No, I was just taking it from item number 32, conduct pulse survey.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that was probably prematurely anticipating what the outcome might be.
That's all right. And just a quick query. You know, I think vital to staff efficiency and improvements and all that sort of stuff, being more effective. The information systems, you know, like, where is it? Improving systems and processes. Can that be funded out of cash reserves, or that's just a question, because it does relate back to how the staff work, and if the work has if the staff have good systems and processes in place, it makes it a better place to work as well. You know, it's more efficient.
Yeah, totally agree. One of the things, one of the opportunities out of that funded innovation productivity role is for us to focus on, you know, parts of our systems and processes, and it's fair to say we've had a low appetite of investing in, you know, corporate software and systems and processes in the past. So I think to the credit of the team, our workflows have significantly improved over the last 12, 15 months. You know, when I arrived, many things were delivered by hand, and, you know, now we're starting to see those things move around the business electronically. Everyone's looking at opportunities, how to do those things. So totally agree, and I expect what you will see is in a not too distant future business cases for some of those systems and processes to be upgraded.
Good old budget bids, Kathy, you've got those to look forward to.
Investment decisions I'd prefer.
Okay. Whatever. Okay. So do we have any other questions?
Just very quickly, so that will the working group be driving the process or are they just checking the pulse?
They have only agreed to come back with some recommendations around the pulse check. We will then work out how we resource whatever that might look like in a sense of their recommendations. So it may be that we do need some people to volunteer and support a process around that pulse check. And it could be that they're built into what we do, which would be ideal. There might be a sense of some of the things we talked about was at the beginning of every meeting we just ask the question, get engaged. So when I say surveys, we want something more formal to be able to bring back and have a headline, but ultimately we just want to know that the people, our people, are seeing improvement. And so there's many mechanisms that we can talk about, and we'll talk about once we get some information back from the working group.
Good.
Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Mayor, through you, do we have, is a consultant still involved in checking in with us in any way, and should they be, just to make sure that our pulse is right, so to speak?
Good question. They are still finishing off some one-on-one meetings with our managers through till about March, I think, so Adrian will be in contact with us. Adrian's been an amazing resource for us. He's been very generous around his advice and his experience in other organisations. We have reached out to him and asked for suggestions around how others might have gone about this. So he will no doubt, again, be generous about some of those options. But yeah, look, we'll reach out from time to time. As I say, he's been very generous with his time.
Thank you.
Just one more procedural thing, just with regards to the agreement about the anonymous mechanism feedback option. Should we just include that as a part of this report, and so that we can come back, just explore that and come back to us?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that.
I don't know who seconded it.
I think
Toby.
Toby.
Yep.
Do you agree to including that?
Okay.
You got
So
some wording on that, Matt?
no, have you?
The GM will explore and report back on an anonymous mechanism feedback option.
Sounds perfect.
Is it all? Do I have to not do anything else with that?
Well, just presuming that you've got the consent of the mover.
Yep.
It's generally happy with it.
So you're happy with what? Yep. And you're happy with that? Okay. Is there any other questions? No? Okay. So if everyone's happy with that, we'll make that change. And so all those, so no one's going to speak against it. We put that motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Annual General Meeting, Resolution Climate Change, 17.001/23. I get councillors to look at the recommendation. Yes. Okay, because of our other motion, the Director will give us some wording for what we need to do here.
Through you, Mayor, just suggested that A would be the same, B would change to, in response to the resolutions, the Council notes a climate change resolution 13.001/23.
Okay. So, do I have a councillor to move the recommendation with the changes? Yeah, yes, yes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibson. You wish to speak to that, councillor Jessup? Thank you. Yep, okay. So is there any other questions regarding that? If there's none, I will ask that, as there's no councillor speaking against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Annual General Meeting Resolution Planning Local Public Transport 17.002/23. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor? Yes, Councillor Campbell Smith. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Campbell Smith, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just briefly, I really do think public transport and transport options are extraordinarily important, especially in the context of the climate emergency motion that we've just passed. We are at sort of the end of a road down here in the Huon Valley, which is getting increasingly more congested. And with respect to the questions that came from the floor earlier, we are approving a lot of new DAs. We do expect to have an increase in population, a significant increase in population down here. And I don't think it's feasible for us to continue the way we are with a complete reliance on the private car, particularly for regular journeys, commuting and just going to events, for instance, in Hobart. So I know there's only so much council can do, apart from through maybe advocacy and maybe through the encouragement of such things as active transport to link up with bus stops and nodes, etc. But I think just to have this on our radar, particularly with respect to the land use planning that we're going to be doing over the next 12 months or so, is really, really important.
Okay. Do we have any other? Yep. Yes.
Through you, Mayor. I've had a conversation before about this. Like, it's been an ongoing issue as we've sort of grown as a population, and I know that the bus companies in the more city areas will say, it depends on the population growth as to whether or not we get buses down here. So the one thing we can be sure of is we will get buses at some stage, because we are growing, rapidly, and the buses have improved, from even 2 or 3 years back. I think there just needs to be some regularity with the buses. The buses that run now currently follow the same route, but they don't follow the same route on a regular basis. So even if we could just make that more of a 5-day-a-week thing instead of like a 2-day-a-week thing, that would be good. But I just wonder how long it's been since they've done a report on the usage of buses down this way, and whether that's something that we could ask and maybe investigate, because I don't think one's been done for maybe 3 years. Well, I might be wrong, but I can't remember, but I think maybe 3 years. So that'd be interesting, because I dare say and the children, young adults that catch them too, would have probably increased in that time. So perhaps another survey might be of interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe I might have one of those in the office. But I also know that with Kingborough's Park and Ride, yeah. I mean, that's a brilliant setup that they have got now. Yeah. So, I know people from the valley that park there and catch that service. So, I mean, it is working. We've just got to get it to come down further. But at least they are going to there and leaving their cars and catching the bus. But there's lots of things that we can do to advocate for these things. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It is an advocacy role.
Yeah.
And like you were mentioning Kingborough, I think that Greater Hobart has had a lion's share of funding for research into these sort of issues. I actually contributed to a public transport research that was being done for that area. We need to be stronger with our advocacy with the state government, and I just wondered if this B should include writing to the state government as a result of the research that we put together to support an argument for a particular for the outcomes based on the research that we conduct. There could be recommendations that we send to state government, and then we have perhaps the mayor and the deputy mayor actually provide some advocacy in person.
In response to that one, be assured that that's happening all the time. That we are doing the, and I know that when you can get hold of an ear or someone within a state growth or a government department, but I know that it's a little way off, but we are sitting in a prime position that we have to be ready, and we have to, for the next state election, we have to have these things that we want. So in the back of everyone's mind, we have to get these things done so that we can get the best results that for the people of the Huon Valley. So we've got a bit of work ahead on top of the other. Okay, so do you think that there's a need to add, do you want to add that? No? Yeah, okay. Yep, all right. Okay, so yes, yep.
Well, if nobody else wants to speak, maybe
Yep.
closing
Yep,
comments,
yes.
if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, just to add on the transport issue, it
Yep.
is a big source of inequity
Yep.
as well.
That's right, yep.
Because there are a lot of people who are students as well, who can't afford a private car,
Yeah.
or ineligible to drive through disability or whatever. So, you know, we have some sort of a duty to advocate on their behalf.
Yep.
And it's not just buses as well.
No, it's right, it's car share.
Yeah, car share, right. There's even on-demand options, there's electrification, there's a lot of things to think about here. And routing, of course, because there's a lot of outlying districts at the moment aren't served at all.
Yeah, that's it.
I know we have got the GM's got a meeting coming up with Kingborough as well, and circular economy here, which I'm really keen to be involved in, and that's great. And there is a model out there. We have the 2010 state government Southern Integrated Transport Strategy.
Yeah.
And really, we just need to push them to update it and get on with it. You know, allocate some funding down here for a change.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not a problem with that at all. Okay, so as there's no councillor to speak against, I ask that. Oh God, it's getting late, isn't it? As there's no councillor to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Funding driveway culvert replacements within sealed, unsealed roads resheeting project 17.003/23. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion, please? Yep. A seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Armstrong, you'd like to speak to the motion?
Through you, Mayor. I think this is probably going to be the best thing that we've done for a long time, when it finally gets done. It's a long-term problem and it's not a short-term fix, but I think this will go a fair way to resolving some of these issues that we're having.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions or anyone? Yeah?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
It's with regard to approved culverts as against all of the unapproved, like the number of people who have just put a culvert across their road with a bit of a pipe because they want to go in that way, or they want to have 2 or 3 or 4 accesses to their property.
Yep.
How are we going to manage that?
Okay. Through you, General Manager, it's probably one it will be for.
Yeah, look, guys, I'm pretty certain when we talked about it last time it was one. There was going to be one approved one. So
And the
those
others
that are
will be no.
unapproved
Yeah.
would be supported.
Yep.
So that was my recollection when we talked through it the last time we went through this paper.
Can I suggest an amendment then that if the board is happy that the report on funding options for the approved driveway culvert because quite right. Thank you. So maybe we can put an amendment in there somewhere that it says a report on funding options for an approved driveway culvert replacement work.
One approved, so.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah, so if they're unapproved, they're approved, so.
A is only receive a noting, so it has to be an addition like C. So part A is.
Oh,
report
yes,
of
good
funding
point.
options for driveway works under reshedding works be received as noted. So if you want to.
I'll back away from that then. But were we just informed that it was one only?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, so you're.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, Colin. Yeah.
Yes, councillor.
Do we need to stipulate that if they're not approved, that they will be, removed because?
We'll have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain it's only one and.
Yeah, but what my concern is that what we're trying to do is actually improve the drainage of the road, and if it's not an approved culvert, it is actually detrimental to the drainage of the road. So is the owner responsible to remove it then? Because we'll be citing ones that are unapproved.
Yeah, look, I think again we can allow the team to look
Yeah.
at
I think it's a compliance issue.
Yes, councillor.
Oh, I think Paul was first, maybe?
Thank you.
Yep.
Communication to the public on this. I think, you know, if we're going to start pointing out Pebble's illegal culverts all over the place, we're going to have some issues to deal with, and we should start early with communication and tell the public how generous we are being in fixing all of these culverts that should be approved anyway, and they should meet the council standards and don't. So,
Not old ones.
no,
They
okay.
do meet the council standards.
Anyway, we're upgrading culverts at our cost, and that's something to sell. But I think at the same time we need to be pretty clear that there's a lot of illegal culverts out there that we're actually going to pull out.
Well,
And if people want to talk to us, then they better come and talk to us and get it approved.
I was talking with Lucky today. I believe we've already sent out correspondence on this because we're looking to do it as part of that road upgrade.
So is that on a road-by-road basis as it's happening?
I'm not sure how the letters are going out, but he did say we've had a number of people, like a handful of people, come back and just try to understand the nature of the correspondence. And no one's objected, so everyone's going to totally understand what council are doing. So it's been positive to start. So we'll see how we go.
So,
yes, councillor Jessup.
so it worries me that correspondence, because we hadn't agreed on how this would be funded. We had a long debate at the last meeting.
This is
and
not to do with funding of the culverts. This is when you've got an illegal one.
Oh, is that the letter you're talking about?
No,
The
no,
illegal
this
culvert
is
letter?
to move this forward, but we had worked out that we were going to work out on this funding piece.
Yeah.
And I believe, and I'd have to look at the minutes, but I was of the understanding we would need to do a follow-up if the funding choice was different.
Yeah.
So this
Well,
was
I-
about
I-
getting the resheeting program
Okay,
started, which we talked about needed to happen ASAP to be able to get that window.
I think council staff were probably excessively preemptive then. They should have said we're going to do it, how it would be funded, because we had a long debate at the last meeting. And I think the thing that comes up is if I build a new house, I'm up for $5,000 roughly to put a culvert in. And there's no subsidy for that, no support, no help. That's the ratepayer's job. If I've got a culvert that's been there for 60 years and it's too small, we're now saying that council's going to spend about 3,800-ish, 3,100, I can't remember exactly. And this is over a 5-year program, so that's going to inflate, and the average price of that culvert's going to be, what, $3,500. So we're talking about funding 347 culverts out of how many culverts have we got in this place? And I think Lockie said $4.2 million worth of culvert costs. So if we're starting this 5-year plan, are we then really committing to a 15-year plan to spend probably $6 million replacing Street People's culverts? Because in 5 years' time, when we've done this, I know exactly what the other people will be saying when we start asking them for money. They'll be saying, well, what about the 347 people who got it for nothing? So,
I think the ones that are going to approval now are having that requirement, so we're not going to be letting people do.
but there's 4.2 million, Lockie said there's $4.2 million worth of culverts that need replacing in today's dollars as of now. That's what he said at the last meeting. So we're just skirting around the outside of the iceberg here. And I'm not convinced that it's equitable to do this as a one-off thing. I think funding it for now out of the reserves is a nice idea, but I think in our discussions at the next budget discussions, we're going to have a really solid discussion to say, are we going to say to the ratepayers, you're all going to be paying an extra % on your rates that will cover these costs long term? Because the communication with the person who lives in Ranelagh in that paved street outside of the shop, they're going to say, well, I'm not interested in that. So it is quite a nuanced communication issue, and I'm just worried about if we're giving, and I know this sounds awful, but we're giving a free ticket to 350 people, and potentially we're not going to be able to give that free ticket to the other however many hundred. There'd be at least, 1,000, 1,500 dirt road culverts that will need to be replaced.
Yeah, I think largely, and Lockie would know better than me, but I think largely anyone that's in a sealed environment is getting what we're giving unsealed right now. So
well, that's a good communication.
When we talk about equity, just because you live on an unsealed road, should you not be getting an equitable situation as we're sort of putting forward here? So it'd be better to have that debate unless, I know Lyle had a conversation with Lockie before he had to leave because he was ill, and maybe there's some insight from that discussion, but maybe we park it and talk about it at our next council meeting.
Yeah, I think, and I did talk to Lockie earlier today about it, and certainly the thought of putting it out of budget reserves so it's not hitting the bottom line, because it is an asset replacement issue, and I think the audit office has actually done the right thing by us.
Yeah.
But I think we have to accept that we're probably making a longer term commitment to do all of them, and that's what I wanted to see in this document, a little bit of detail about, well, how many are there priority ones, and so it's just a little bit lacking there, but it's expedient. But I'm happy to defer this broader conversation to the budget discussions. But we're going to be upfront with the community and say, if you don't want us grading, and he used the example with me today about a road that they used to have to grade every 3 months. Since they've replaced a couple of the culverts on that, they're now grading every 12 months. So there's a bit of a cost benefit discussion in here, and maybe that's what we need to talk to the community about, is that by spending a couple of $1 million now, we're actually going to be saving the community. Yeah. So I think there's a bit more work that needs to be done, and a major communication piece where we actually start talking about this in the context of climate change and all those things, because
I was going to say the same thing.
It's a big issue.
Not long ago, we were just talking about a resource. Well, the resource is going to need funding to get things done. This isn't.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. I just see this as, I think there's a term for it, isn't there? Postalisation of, where everybody pays a little bit towards the common good. I mean, I know that some people will perhaps benefit by having a nice improved culvert, but we'll all benefit from having roads that don't flood and aren't blocked and are rutted. And I mean, it's in this discussion number 13, it particularly says that. It says the works done will extend the life and value of money of works, improve public safety, reduce public nuisance and environmental harm through reduced sedimentation. So, I think that, and it talks about the engagement up above as well. I think those are the messages that need to go out. So I'm fully supportive of to this.
Thank you. Yes, councillor Thorpe?
I just have a question on the 5-year schedule. Is that 5-year schedule set so it includes the entire network of roads that are needing this upgrade to culverts? Or is it?
Yes.
It talks about which roads.
Yep. Tracy, oh, it was Tracy. I think you had the chat with Lockie about this one.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor.
Yes.
The roads are obviously categorised. So what this report is talking about is that 5-year schedule will cover collector, distributor and the major local roads within the network. So it'll get across all of those roads within that 5-year term.
So where does the 4.2 million come from that Lockie was talking about? Because this doesn't add up to 4.2 million.
Again, that's not all the roads. It's the roads that are classified under those classifications.
In those categories, yes. And this is, the communication side of this will be also that to the people that put in the 2 or 3 accesses for people on their property, that they're not allowed to do that either. So, you know, the communication out there is to the businesses that are actually doing some of this work for people putting in their second access, that it's not okay to do. So we have to, there's a little bit of education, not just to the owner, but to the people that are actually doing the work.
Can I ask that we be kind in that conversation?
Yes,
Because
definitely.
I've certainly seen a couple of cases, and during my campaigning I talked to somebody who had been told they couldn't have the second access, but they were on a crest of a hill on a very, very, very busy road, and it was basically a turning circle in front of their house. If they had one access, they would be backing out into a major distributor road, and so,
That's common sense, sort of.
But they were still told they'd have to remove it. So,
Yeah.
so maybe one of the options would be we have to support them in a planning process, and they may have to pay for that second culvert.
Yeah.
You know, but I think we just let's not be too heavy-handed with that. Maybe.
Oh no, definitely. But there needs to be some contractor communication along those lines as well. So, yeah, okay. So, Councillor Armstrong, would you have any closing? Would you like to close?
Do we need to put anything in the motion about the communication strategy, or are we just going to? Is it?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I just think we do really need to talk about this with the community, because if there is a cost involved and not everyone's benefiting, there will be those that will be not happy.
Yep.
There'll be others that will be ecstatic, and that's going to fall back to whether you've got lots of money to spend or whether you've got no money to spend, and whether you want to make do with your driveway because that's just how you feel, you know. But I think I'm not sure how you, like, we can talk about it obviously, but do you advertise it somewhere? Do you let the whole community know? Like, instead of just on you know, that particular road that's going to be affected at a certain time, or is that just
I think
not an option?
The communication side of things is something that I had a conversation today with the general manager about, as far as what I can do as communication in all forms of media.
Because you know what the grapevine's like. I got a letter. Why didn't you get a letter? How come you're getting a new driveway? I'm not getting a new driveway. Like, you can just hear it.
These things happen.
Yeah.
If you live in a certain area, you could sell your property, and I paid storage in Port Ewan and then moved out Port Ewan,
Yep.
but I paid for it in my rates in Port Ewan to get that.
Yeah.
You know, to get it up and running. So it's what did we say before about we're not going to please everybody, but we do have to communicate.
Yes, well, if we just send everybody a very simple letter of explanation without making it sound very complicated, and with the explanation as to why this is happening and the benefits going forward, then I'm quite sure they'll be, more appreciative. Yeah.
And I think Deb, under paragraph 9, talks about digital engagement as
Yeah.
so the website, social media, I know our one sort of trades program is much awaited, so there will be, a fair bit of interest in this, and the fact that we've been proactive and we can talk to, this initiative is supportive of some of those climate concerns, the flooding. I think this will be something that is well received.
I do too, because of the flooding situation, particularly this year. Like, it's probably a good place to start because there's that fragile road base to start off with, but there's also that mentality that we need to get something more permanent in place, don't we? Like, realistically.
So this is
So,
a start. This is
yeah, it'd be good.
Start,
It'd be good.
Any other initiatives going on.
Yep.
I think it'll be well received.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. As there's no councillors to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Aquatic Facilities Investment Summary, 17.004/23. Do I have a councillor to, after we've looked at the recommendation, do I have a councillor to move the motion? Yes, Councillor Temby. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Temby, would you like to speak to? Okay. All right. Do we have any questions? Or yes.
Yeah. I actually don't think we have enough information to make this decision. I'd like to put a procedural motion forward to defer this and have a workshop on it. I think we need a lot more information on. We've got two pools that are 17 kilometres apart. They both need work on them. It's a huge cost to council. We're trying to find budget savings to prioritise money on a tight budget. We have no idea about the structure of this building. There's some serious doubt about the structure of the building, and I just don't want to be putting good money after bad, and I think we should make a very careful decision on this. So,
Okay. Yeah.
Can I just note just a point of clarity, because the recommendation is just to receive a note. The second is to recommend that we consider in the budget process whether to become one, and the third one is that the report on the investment strategy be released background to the tender. So just clarifying that we're
not actually.
We're aware of what the recommendation is.
Yeah. So the recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may,
Yep.
that's why I didn't speak to it.
Yeah, no, that's right, 'cause it's receiving, yeah.
Quite clear.
Yeah.
We do have
Yep.
a huge amount of information that's
Yep.
been given to us.
Yep.
And it's a bucket of money that is just like an open checkbook, how much money do you want to take? We do have to make these hard decisions, and I think that the extent of the information that's been provided to us is quite good. It's very upsetting to think that, for example, we purchased the Port Huon pool not that long ago, and it's in the state it is, and it's a result of not being able to afford to maintain it as well as we should have, and so the asset is just is now not considered to be not worthy of the cost involved. We just can't afford, or it seems to be that the information provided to us is that we can't afford to maintain it to the standard that is required for health and safety.
As I said, we're only receiving noting. We're not voting on any major thing here, because that just opens up a can of worms. So at the moment, we need to look at the recommendation and then pass that if we are happy to do that.
so is it a proposal that we will workshop this?
That the report of the summary would be read, blah, 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 throughout the annual, yes, or at the budget process. We're going to have to.
I mean, we still, in B still, is still sort of assuming that we are going to consider this investment
Well, that we
report.
are though. We haven't
Yeah,
made a decision.
But with respect to the development of a new aquatic facility, I think that's jumping the gun a bit. I think we need to sit down and think about this and whether we are.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
and so I think that's a bit of a, I think we have to say that we have to consider this through the annual budget process and long-term financial strategy, but I don't think we
Need to put that bit.
Yeah, that second bit beyond the because that's making an assumption about the sort of, whereas I think we need to have a completely open brainstorm about the whole
Yep,
thing and,
no.
and invite the chap from the Port Huon
Yep.
to come in because he was extolled in the background report, has been very knowledgeable,
Okay. Does that change that greatly if we remove that section? No? Okay. Okay, so Councillor Temby and Councillor Armstrong, are you happy if we were to just have through the 2023-24 annual budget process and long-term financial strategy that we look into the investment? What wording? How would you like that?
Through the annual budget process and long-term financial strategy, further investment be investigated, I guess, or considered.
Full stop, considered.
Oh, full stop.
Consider, I think.
Yeah, after
stop,
considered.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
all right. Okay. All right. If that's...
Well, I guess, I still like to workshop this with councillors and so is that, should we put that in as a D, that a workshop is scheduled to discuss this? It's sort of before the budget, really.
If we can fit it in.
Yeah, what we need to remember is that the budget process isn't one workshop, it's four, so
Yeah.
we can incorporate it as part of that as a consideration, unless you wanted to just get it effectively a 2-hour block and talking about the employment component. Just remind everyone that it's going to be over.
4, yeah. No? Okay. So if you're happy, Councillor Temby, with that? Okay, all right. So do we have any other, anyone to speak against or anything that would go with it? Otherwise, yes, Deb agreed to the changes, yep. As there's no councillors to speak against the motion, then I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. The motion is carried. It's that time again to advise that council is about to go into closed council. Thank you to those people who joined our gallery this evening and those of you who took the time to watch the meeting online this evening. The next meeting of ordinary meeting of the council is Wednesday the 22nd of February. Thank you. Thanks, Glenn. The recommendation 19.001/23 is that the meeting now be closed to the public as at 9:38. Pursuant to Regulation 15 of the Meeting Procedures Regulations to discuss the following matters. Confirmation of closed minutes, general reports closed minutes, report on tender TN 193 Port Huon Sport and Aquatic Centre renovations, report on Geefton Town Hall Controlling Authority Director's appointment and minor amendments to rules, report on TN 172 Dover Medical Expansion Centre, and report on General Manager's contract matters. Do I have a councillor to move the motion, please? Councillor Jessup, and a seconder, Councillor Canberra-Smith. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. In accordance with the Huon Valley Council's audio recording of council meeting policy, recording of the open session of this meeting ceased at 9:39. I'll adjourn the meeting for a short break at 9:39. If you need to go